Kel, go ahead and count up to 10 if you wouldn't mind, brother.
1, 2, 3, 4. Holy shit. Going big. Sometimes I get a little excited.
I know.
That's fucking horse shit.
That's good, though. That's good.
20 dwarves took turns doing handstands on the carpet. That's for Bugsy.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
No. Listen, we kicked this thing off. I am beyond it. You don't really know what like. So he joked around. He's like, "Did you bring your lacrosse ball to get signed?" Like, it's one of those things for me. Even sitting here talking to you, and I'm even such an amateur. You're doing this right. Is to sit here and be in the flesh, the Supple Leopard. Now, I was doing my research on you. I didn't realize how big you were. Like, I was doing my research, and then I'm like Savant's podcast, and then I'm going through, and I'm trying to find everything that's not about mobility. Like, one thing I don't want to jam a ton about today is fucking mobility and fixing tissues. All right, there's one of the things I don't.
I actually wanted to spend 3 hours talking about your shoulder pain.
And then I'm like, the motherfucker's been on Tim Ferriss now like twice, or like you've done like the Tim. I'm like, I guess I didn't realize, maybe because I was in the CrossFit bubble. I'm like, he's just a god in the CrossFit bubble, and I want to get into some other things. Like
First of all, little G.
Okay, small G.
Demi.
But you you did work with when the Obama administration was there, right? You guys did some work with them, and you're maybe doing some stuff with the current administration. I want to tie all that together. Like, this podcast is going to be just as selfish for me as kind of to figure out how the ecosystem, like we talked about when I interviewed you recently on that 365 videos and a New York Times bestseller book. Like, how does that ripple effect? Like we were just talking about
Two New York Times
two New York Times because you had Ready to Run, and then
Wall Street Journals.
And the other one was about sitting and sedentary. What was the third one?
Deskbound.
That's right. And I do want to talk about the nonprofit too. I feel like that doesn't get any no press.
I appreciate that. And we're also deep into, I think, is the most important work we've done yet, a new book called Built to Move.
Okay.
Which I'm like, we have to take everything that we're learning here and apply it. Otherwise, this is all we're just making upper middle class people better at fitness.
Well, I want to get there. I want to start.
Cool.
You're German. You're from Germany.
I grew up there.
You grew up there. So you went U.S.
Outsider.
So U.S. born. Why does one go over to Germany that young?
My mom was a professor.
Okay.
I had just a single working mother. I have my dad was basically, who's now deceased, was basically like raging alcoholic. He was the great Santini. He was the captain of the football team in college and flew F4s and, was trying to self-medicate because his father was so
When did he pass?
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
So my mom and my dad divorced. My mom defended her PhD on like a Tuesday. On a Wednesday, we were on the plane. It was a big expatriate community there in Garmisch, southern Bavaria, really like southern Germany, 10 kilometers from Austria. And this like my middle school or my elementary school photos are just crazy. Like with a photo of like my class and then like the Alps. And the dollar was really high there, and I think really at the time the dollar was really excellent. And I suspect what happened is that my mom, as a single working mother, was living in Seattle, found a community where she could drop in, and suddenly it was super insular and safe, where I could ride my bike everywhere. I had to be home by dark, and so single working mom finds something that's working. She's a professor. She's a psychologist at a local international school. And then, man, it's the best life you can possibly have as a kid. Like, I mean the best life you can have as a kid.
What's it like having a mom that's a psychologist? Was she constantly trying to just work you out? Like, you would say something like, well, what you really mean, Kelly, is this.
No, she's much more subtle than that. Look, every parent is a ninja at manipulating their kids, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm working. I got a 4-year-old. I'm trying to be my best at it.
Yeah, you really just plant seeds and bombs and, and the rakes that they'll step on 10 years from now. That's really, it's just you're laying a booby trap, like,
Landmines.
My mom would do things like, she'd be like, I'd be in trouble. She'd say, sit down, because I was already taller than she was. And I remember one day I was like, no, I'm not sitting down.
I'm going to maintain my alpha position up here.
You
sit down.
So, I lived there until I was finished the 8th grade. I went to high school in the 8th grade. And then my mom had remarried an army doctor, met an army doctor there who was stationed there in Bavaria. And then we moved to D.C. for a couple of years, and then Carmel for a couple of years, which also was not the worst high school to go to. And then went to Boulder. So, when I came back to the United States, I came back as a freshman and went to a huge school. Do you remember that movie, Remember the Titans?
Yes, of course.
I played in that football league in Virginia, which was one of the first integrated schools.
Yeah.
It was huge. I think there's like 60 or 70 people on our freshman football team. I mean, it's that kind of thing. So huge football program, and I had never played football, but I suddenly discovered the glory of football.
Of hitting
in Virginia.
people.
It was really amazing. And then
What position?
I played tight end and outside linebacker. And I was,
I can see you as an outside linebacker.
I was really, I caught a lot of balls. I was really good at holding onto the ball, getting my ass kicked. I was really like.
Do you like the highlight of catching, or do you like hitting?
I liked defense better. I thought I was going to be offense. This really says a lot about my what I know about myself now is that defense is art. It's understanding, it's interpretation. You're presented with something that's fluid and dynamic, and you have to make a decision and then react. It's mountain biking, that's skiing, that's whitewater kayaking. You know, everything is in sort of fluid state. Offense is like, the equivalent to offense for me is like building like climbing. You have to piece this protection. It's like if you're an engineer, you love offense.
If the corner runs that perfect route at the same time and you let it go, he's gonna catch it. And the play's gonna work.
We need this, but that's not how my brain has worked. And if you look at the crazy stuff that we do here, it's all about interpretation, reaction. Someone comes in to the gym, someone comes into the clinic. I need to interpret what's happening, come up with a plan, have buy-in. Like, that's art and defense, and that's why it just speaks to me.
I've always seen that offense-defense analogy is those that like chaos and having to pivot when they don't know the pivot's coming, and those who the pivot and the chaos actually ruins the plan. So if you're at a quarterback and you've got that receiver that's going to run that run route, if your guy gets jarred on the line and he goes off course, it's going to fuck up that. You don't want any chaos. You want it to go exactly as coach drew up. But if you're on defense, you thrive. That's the whole point, is to take this beautiful play that the offense have drawn up and shit on it.
I think you just described my childhood.
Okay.
Great job. And probably that was some of the most insightful information about my own psyche I haven't connected the dots on.
I talked to your mom before I came here.
Pretty much.
Filled me in.
I'm pretty sure that's the case. You know, what's interesting is I just read Obama's biography. And one of the things that I, just trying to understand myself, I'm almost 50. I'm 48 this year.
48, yeah.
And, one of the things that President Obama said in the biography was just like his run for president. He's like, it was pseudo-megalomania, right? And when I say that, clearly there's some negative connotations there. But I want everyone to appreciate that if you ever opened a gym or taken that leap of faith or said, I'm going to be the center of the universe in my community by starting a business, being the center of gravity, that's a form of megalomania. Like the arrogance.
Yeah, the what I call the entrepreneurial ego, the ability to say, I'm so good at something.
It takes so much chutzpah to be able to do that. And what I'll say now, I have the first, I am unemployable. That's what I'll say, right? In fact, a few years ago, I got this tattoo and it went below my elbow, which is
purposely,
me, purposely. Like
saying,
I'm burning. I'm
Yep.
never working for anyone else again. Burning the ship. But looking back, I started my first business very young.
What was it?
Fixing all the mountain bikes in my neighborhood and cleaning bikes and doing bike tuning. And it was 5 marks, which was like $3, and I was rich.
Was that just from you being on mountain bikes all the time, or did you enjoy learning the engineering? If you're a mountain biker, you just learn because your shit breaks when you're out on a trail and you have to learn how to put together, or did you enjoy the engineer part of it?
We were just self-reliant. And then I saw a problem. And the problem was everyone's bikes were out of tune or dirty or needed, fixing. And it was an easy thing for me to do. And it was a small enough amount of money where I realized I could have this recurring revenue. I could, I just solved the problem. And I'll say that that's probably the first time, and I don't know if you could even put voice to that until just now, but it's the first time I realized it was like, oh, there's an opportunity in seeing problems. If I can help someone solve a problem, that's good business.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that forever.
I want to go back. You were talking about your mom. So my mom, I'm a single mom. My dad died when I was 16. Huge drug alcohol thing. Couldn't handle it. Went home one day, found the handgun, and said, I'm just going to take the easy way out. That was like that was his go. The guy was a phenomenal salesman. Loved cocaine. Just these 80s, like child of the 80s, this entire lifestyle, and it just didn't mix. But
full transparency, I'm terrified of cocaine. Never done cocaine. Because I'm sure I'll love it.
So I've never done it. I was like one of those things. I was so angry. There's a couple things I'll never do. Never do. And I just made that list. My mom smoked as a kid, and I was like, I'll never smoke a cigarette.
I didn't drink until I was 22.
Really?
Never touched alcohol.
Because of your dad.
Uh-huh. And I feel like I dodged so many bullets. I ended up starting.
Go for it.
This is really powerful because it's a conversation Juliet and I have all the time. So Juliet is a child of divorce, right? A lot of gnarly stuff. I had a missing father, some gnarly stuff, kind of critically poor mom. We never starved, but it's tough, right? Working professor mom. Again, privilege. I'm a white person. There's a whole lot of things in my favor. But I learned to cope with exercise and scaring the shit out of myself. That's how I coped. Like I self-soothe with that. And even today, Juliet's like, I'm sure you have ADHD. I'm sure of it.
Did you ever feel, I know when I was, in high school, my mom, she tried to disciplinary me. There's no dad around. There's no one to whoop my ass when I come home. It was one of those things where I was more of a disciplinary problem because I knew at the end of the day I could get yelled at, but there's no one to whoop my ass the next day. And I think that again, there was a period of time where that was super defiant, but then later on I reversed that and it became way more nurturing, realizing I was the male figure in the house, having to, not be a complete shithead.
My mom, I played with fire and knives and anything that I could do to, jump off cliffs. And I mean, I carried a knife to school in my shoe for a long time. Didn't tell anyone about it. I just had that discipline. I'm not
just
gonna get
in the
kicked out.
body, like in the soul?
Like my kangaroos. They had a little pocket on the outside. I had one of those mini Swiss Army knives with like a nail file that I could shiv someone with the scissors or something. I don't know. But, at one point I had like 12 knives hidden in my room for some. I'm just, I get a little obsessive.
Are you still a knife guy?
I'm still a knife guy.
Okay.
I have lots of
Do you have
knives.
like an everyday carry one?
I do always have a knife with me. I have sacrificed more knives at the TSA than it is probably healthy. But there's some things I think the key to understanding me is that I become I'm obsessive, and I really end up perseverating on something. That relationship with your mom, I figured out that I could, if I just played a really excellent game all the time, the world was mine. So I got straight A's, good kid.
Like straight game theory kind of game?
Like I realized that if I jumped through all these societal hoops, one is that my mom would be like, my mom was, understanding her complicated family, her own trauma. It was a lot of nurturing came about in my family if you didn't talk about your feelings and you were a stud, right? Everything's good. We're good. We'll put on a happy face and kick ass. You're all kicking ass. All right, we're fine. Do whatever you want. So I realized early on that if I was successful and the best at whatever I did, and that was pretty easy. I have a near photographic memory, so that makes things a lot easier to learn and pick up. And in my defense, I saw people working their ass off in school that I didn't have to do because I could just remember and regurgitate.
When did you first realize you had a photographic memory?
Early on, I feel
like that's a fucking Marvel superpower.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
Like I'd walk in, I'd see it when, and it just, makes me a terrible student and an excellent student. If I sit in class and pay attention and then do the work, I'm like, okay, now I just have to regurgitate. It's just right there. It made me really good I'm really excellent at pattern recognition too. But I remember in grad school, my wife was like, you're just staring at the page. You're not even taking notes. I was like, yeah, I'm studying. She's like, you're just staring at the page. Like, Juliet was with law school. And
you have to take the bar.
Yeah, she had to take the bar. And so she had just color-coded things and notes.
She probably
and I was
hated you because of your ability.
Yeah, well, and I was like, I studied for I sound like so arrogant. I'm so sorry. Just some context. I studied for the PT boards for a weekend. I was like, I got it. Right, I'm fine. At GRE, I was like, I flipped through the book. I was like, it's going to be good enough. And that's some of that, I think, for me, is always recognizing when the effort is enough, and that, like, the first year of PT school, I set it was this girl who was like, her job was to get straight A's. That was her whole identity. And I was like, I can do this, and I'll show you. So she and I battled for a top position in PT school. And then I had a baby. Then I opened the gym. And then I said to my professors, I'm not going to get straight A's anymore because it's not worth my time. I'm just going to do enough.
Do what I need to do,
B's and B pluses. And that's,
I get straight A's and then the gym and the baby suffer, or I could get C's and everything can kind of
Well, you can't get C's because you get kicked out of grad school with C's.
Okay.
But you have to hold 3.0. But that's easy. That's pretty manageable. Okay. My point is, I had this hole in my life from crazy family, and my dad was one of those chaotic people who disrupted the whole family. And so I was his son, and that was, the transference was there, it was real. So I definitely had this burden on my back to achieve, right? To show my dad, like, why does my dad want to be in my life? What's going on? I'd see him
when
every
did he
6
come
months.
Back in?
He never really did.
Okay.
In and out, and then died estranged, which is terrible. He never met his kids. And what I'll say now is,
his grandkids, or you mean?
Yeah, his grandkids.
Yeah.
His grandkids. Sorry. One of the things that you have to understand the context of people's lives if you're going to work with people. You don't need to know but you need to understand what their tendencies are, what makes them tick, what levers. Like, it's what's interesting about people. One of my good friends is this woman named Erin Cafaro, who has a couple Olympic gold medals in rowing. She's like the closest thing I have to an actual sister as an only child. And she's now getting her doctorate in counseling. And she's like, hey, I just want to reframe something. She told me this a few years ago. She's like, all those defense mechanisms and all those coping strategies, they're your superpower. And you just have to identify when those mechanisms come up and you start to default to those things, see them for what they are as triggers, as, oh, that's telling me something. It's information. And my ability to like my super secret power was to dissociate. Like Juliet will laugh that I have this thing called the gift, which is I'm really, really stressed. I'm going to lay down on this concrete and take a nap. I can nap
just go
anywhere.
Sleep right through it.
Just sleep. I'm just going to turn off. And that's how I coped with anxiety for a long time. And, what's interesting is that you can look at your genetic profile and see that you're a worrier or a warrior, right? Juliet is the warrior in the family. I'm the worrier in the family. And I had a ton of anxiety. I don't get nervous. I just get anxious. I want to perform. I want to do well. And it leads me to prepare well and, make sure I do my thing. But, a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago, Juliet's like, I think you need to talk to someone about your family and your anger and your craziness and about your dad. And I was like, that's something I should do?
Did you just compartmentalize, put in the back,
and
put in the closet?
And just all the things that allowed me to be the megalomania, be the, circling back to that, being the, take the big risk, stand in front of the big crew, right? Coach, take, be exposed. Like I could do all of that and just put this little door down over my heart, right? So that megalomania, single, only child of my mother who was telling me I'm a great kid, right? Missing father figure, all of that, like what's that? That all allowed me to do this, 100%. And so what I think is interesting now is, my kids don't have that. My kids are super stoked, happily married family. But 8 years ago, Juliet's like, you got to talk to someone. Like, this is not serving you anymore. And I think that's the way I want people to say.
You resisted it first?
I saw the truth of it, I old enough to see the truth of it. Dad dies, I don't cry. Dog dies, the only being that's been with me for 20 years, it just,
ball your eyes out.
Wreck,
Done.
right? And I think Juliet's like, I should have noticed that pattern, right? And so Juliet, I talk to someone now, I have these things called feelings, which are just
they're insane.
Gnarly.
They're great and they're horrible.
I mean, we're watching The Voice last night, I'm just weeping. So what's interesting is now I have a lot more anxiety that I feel, but that's also a superpower. So what I want people to appreciate, and this, man, all of this comes back to sport. The things that get us here are not the things that keep us here. And if you're trying to understand yourself through training and sport, which is the big filter that most of us run, we don't realize we're running it, but you get this immediate feedback. I sucked today. Why did I suck today? Well, I was super stressed. I didn't drink water. I didn't eat, right? I didn't warm up. You can just see these one-to-one relationships between progress and no progress, or output. And so it's an easy diagnostic tool. One of our best hiring practices is we hire people that we've trained with forever, because I know everything I need to know about you.
You know so much more about somebody on the training floor than you ever can on a resume or an interview.
You've heard me say that Dune is my favorite book in the whole world. And there's a scene in the movies and all the books where the young hero, Paul Atreides, is being tested by this woman, and he has to put his hand in this box, and the box creates nerve induction where he thinks his hand is burning and melting. And she's holding a knife at his neck, or like a poison needle. And if he pulls his hand out and withdraws from the painful stimulus, she kills him. Right? So the choice is keep your hand in the box, be conscious of all the pain and suffering so that you can be aware and watch it and override any of that pain.
It's the scene of Fight Club where Brad Pitt pulls Edward Norton's hand on and pours the burning out. Well, he's doing it to himself and says, embrace the pain. That pain is the one thing you can actually own.
And she's like, our test is crisis and observation, because people don't realize what's going to happen. So she's just watching his reaction. And when it starts to get painful, you get to see what your default tendencies are. So when you start to get stressed at work, you start to have a bad conversation, you have to have a hard opportunity, your kid, you feel shame or guilt about something you did, we're going to find out who you are and how you behave in that situation. Well, it turns out the microcosm of that is the gym. Because as soon as it's heavy or as soon as it's hard, what did you do? Did you talk? Did you take your ego out? Did you default? Did you create what I think we're suffering from the most right now in society, which is this, we call it plausible deniability, which means I worked so hard, I broke. And then I'm like, well, it's not my fault. I just worked so hard, right? And versus, hey, I started this business and I augured myself into the ground, destroyed every relationship I had, but I'm an entrepreneur. And I'm like, well, you're a shitty one.
Talk to me more about the therapy. I think that's people probably look at you and see a very strong position, a successful position. Do you still do this therapy?
No, she fired me.
She fired you.
Yeah.
She's like, because you were good to go, like go and enjoy the world, and if you need anything, you got my number.
That's right. And because I had become self-aware enough about the processes, and man,
how long did you go?
I was probably in there for a year.
Yeah,
once a week, and really extraordinary.
It's powerful shit.
Well, I'll tell you, this year, what we've learned is that kids are the most anxious they've ever been. We're seeing the most depression in kids ever. And what we haven't done, the same way we haven't done a good job of helping people understand what a physical practice looks like. How do you take care of yourself? You're just crushed with TV and fads and take these turmeric pills and, my daughter, we were hanging out in the hot tub the other night, and my 16-year-old, she's like, you know what? When dogs are fat, you feed them a little less and walk them a little more. She's like, when people are overweight, you give them fat burners. Cleanses.
Wise girl.
And I was like, wow, that's
very observant. Yeah.
I was like, the difference is that dog doesn't have a choice,
yeah.
right? And all this agency and choice is a gift and also a problem. So, what we haven't done also is this is how you eat, this is how you sleep. So who's responsible for that? Well, that's why the trainer, for me, the coach is the center of the universe right now. The most important person is the person leading, who's the center of the nucleus of the physical interaction, because that's the only place we're having all these conversations about, and it matters more because you're not walking, you're not eating Whole Foods, you're not eating like your grandma ate. But then the other side of that is, where do we get to talk about feelings and vulnerability? A lot of people don't go to church anymore. It's not happening. I was a Boy Scout as a kid in Germany. Really different experience, I think, than scouting in America. And the Boy Scouts are not a great organization. We'll just say that. And yet I had this bananas experience in this international thing where all of the international scouts were led by women. Like the Americans, I'm like, the Ukrainians are like,
we find the local pedophile. We're like, hey,
where are the girls? And I was like, we don't have girls in our scouts, but I'll drink wine and hang out with you because you're Italian. And want to trade kerchiefs. So, what I see is now we are bumbling along, coping, self-soothing, and basically just like animals, putting our hand in the box, pulling it out when it's too painful, put it back in the box, put it out, and we're never ever conscious of that. And so if the goal is crisis and observation, how are we doing? What are our default tendencies? Do you default? Do you become more open and vulnerable? A couple things that, I think I maybe even talked about with you, with my wife, is I have two sayings that just changed my world. One is, you may be right about that. And it's not about her being right. It's about me leaving open to the possibility that she can see something that I can't. And this is definitely something that if you're in business and you have partners, you need to work with this. If you're in business, you have to be self-aware enough that if you're getting feedback, that you're not defensive to it. Because feedback in my family early on was criticism. And that was not okay. So I had the thickest defensive walls ever. And that was really useful when I was like, hey, by the way, we should probably have more hip flexion. You should be able to take, I could use that and deflect all the craziness. Turns out I was right, but that helps. But, when I say to my wife now, you may be right about that, what I realized was that, she's on my team and has my back in a way no one else does, and can see things because her brain is wired differently than my cuckoo brain, that it's a competitive advantage. And it may not be that she's correct or she's giving the right thing, but the pause and the natural default for me to not react, but to say, I'm going to be curious about that. I'm going to show curiosity. If we had that defensive mechanism built in to all of us, which is, you may be right about that, then just think about the possibility.
It leaves you open to the conversation.
Oh, my God.
And that's the big, especially now, because everything now, especially, I don't care if you're left, right, red, blue, whatever. It's just, you say X, I don't like X, then I shut that down, I call you a name. There's
training,
yes,
internet, Instagram, food. I mean, choose something. It's just what we want to do, is understand. And some of this came from me working with world's best coaches. I want to understand what their thinking is. So when I watch a coach, I'm watching, for example, the techniques and tools, but I'm like, what problem is this person trying to solve? So if I'm seeing chiros or other competitors, where I'm really looking at is how are they trying to solve this set of problems, right? What problems are they trying to solve? That's so interesting. And when I suddenly became vulnerable, when I had the wherewithal to say, hey, Juliet, I realize that it's not going to be the end of my essence, ego, essentialism by admitting that you may be right, but also puts a pause where we can explore that option, and I still have the right to say, oh, I was right.
Well, that's my second thing is, so after you make, so I'm literally downloading this from my own relationships. I love that. What's the next piece? So okay, you may be right. What's the next step you have then in that conversation?
Well, one is that when that comes up like that, you already have hit the brakes enough that you're going to now watch and observe. Crisis and observation, right? You have some dissonance. There's some dissonance. There's a disagreement. There's
counting back down from 10 for a kid who throws tantrums.
Sure. You got to take 3 breaths before you move anything, right? But the rate limiter there, that's important in of itself. The second piece that I think is the follow-on to this is I'm really become a ninja of asking, tell me more about that. And that curiosity that's triggered by that now gives permission to explore that a little further. So if it's a feeling or, you can then sit and not be sitting in shame or anger or defensiveness. I'm just curious. Like, tell me what you want or tell me more about that. Why are you thinking that way? And, man, that is just like those 2 superpowers. I'm telling you, like, call it manipulation, call it level 9 judo fu. Like, it's really amazing. If you take those 2 skills into your relationships, because being a human being, like, do you win training? Do you win?
No.
Did you win the gym?
No.
Do you win business? I'm like, do you win being married? You don't. So what I'm proposing is that you actually need to play better, and these are the 2 of the ways that I've found that allows me to play better, and that's the infinite game. That's the goal.
And even if you're having a conversation with someone and that you truly, in your heart of hearts, in your brain of brain, you're like, I'm completely right. They are completely wrong. Those still just open one door to say, hey, let's have the conversation, and then the second door is, let that person shit on their leg when they don't actually have a leg to stand on in their argument, if that's the case, or express their feeling, whatever it may be.
And it gets you out of having to be defensive. So, like my own pattern was I'd be defensive, and then Juliet could be like, we're not even talking about the thing. We're talking about your defensiveness now. So by removing my reaction to your reaction, I think is really the goal of Buddhist, Christian, Hindu thought. I mean, it really is about trying to be better. And honestly, it's the same thing we should be doing in the gym. It's the same microcosm. I don't mean to take this back, but, is this working? How do we know it's working? It's all up for negotiation. And every single day, we're going to come in with a fresh set of templates and a fresh set of eyes and be curious. And then this becomes the greatest exploratory, my best friends, all of my best friends train, period. And it's one of we play, train, like it just cuts through so much of the practice. I have plenty of very nerdy cerebral friends, but the people I'm closest to, Margaret, is one of our first hires. She's my wife's best friend and one of the greatest training partners we've ever had. They train together, and I don't think people realize that if you can train with your partner specifically, like Julie and I just went for a mountain bike ride. We cleared the calendar. We got a little hour and a half ride in this morning. It's so easy from our house. That's the secret to our whole life, is that we make it so easy that there's no excuses, no barriers. I don't have to drive anywhere. I love it, right? And but that's an hour and a half together of being dropped, having to fuel,
quality
time,
caught.
and we need now more than ever to be closer to people and all people.
Have you done love language tests with Juliet?
No.
That's
but I'm sure it's acts of service.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
if Juliet, I know enough about this game that if Juliet, if I take out do the laundry, handle the things I say I'm going to handle, acts of service. It's really great that you say that. For Juliet's birthday is in April, and there are always physical presents, but I started making her coffee every day for a year, and so I'll get up and make the coffee. And that is the first act of service. And you want to have a better day, make your partner an act of coffee. Like first thing in the morning, good morning.
What's the one that gets you, what's your love language? What does it for you? There's words of affirmation, physical touch, acts of service, gifts. There's all kinds of stuff. What is it for
Words of
yours?
affirmation, physical touch.
Yeah.
Those things. Again, I think I learned to survive as a kid, and those tendencies are still like, I got this. I'm hard. I don't need anyone. I can do it by myself. And then combined with the fact that I was just like a mutant kid running around Germany by himself in the woods. Like, I also like to be alone. And so I'm not an introvert at all. I'm not, clearly. But I still I don't mind being alone. Like, the kids go away or something happens and Jill's like, "You can be okay?" And I'm like, "I don't have to talk to anyone today. It's fine.
This is great.
It's totally fine. I'm never bored. I've never been bored in my life."
You and Juliet both came from divorced families, and so I came from the horrible, nasty divorce, and then I had 2 grandparents that got divorced, and they remarried and got together, and best friends ever. Like, they're at each other's. I mean, they're just them. So like, it was this mom and dad, that 1 degree of separation, a horrible experience, and then grandparents, an amazing example of that. Divorce can just be an alternative family lifestyle. You just have a bigger one, So I get married, and we have my daughter. She's 4 now, and the one thing, just like I said, Dad did coke. I'm not gonna do that. Mom smoked. I'm not gonna do that. I'm never gonna get divorced. I'm not gonna put her through that. Well, lo and behold, me and my ex-wife, and we're still amazing friends. We just realized we got into it. We were way better friends. We're amazing co-parents, but husband-wife was not gonna be the role for us. So we decided to split. It's super amicable, and now I've got this daughter. I'm like, I just wanted to have the most normal bring up possible, and it catalysted the other day. Girlfriend that I'm dating now for a while, we were dropping her off at my ex-wife's house, and she says, "Hey Jess, you want to come in and me and my mom can have a sandwich, and I could show you my room, and we could play in my mom's room?" Like, she has no idea that her world is actually untraditional. She has no clue, because you build that in. And I'm curious for you, because you and Juliet, you guys have been together now 20 plus years. There's always rocky roads and stuff like that. Was that like some glue? Like, oh, we're never divorce. Fuck that. We'll get through this come hell or high water.
Yes, and it is for me. You can define marriage however you want. Marriage makes it trickier to bail. You can't just drop the bar and walk away. Right. You got to clean up the chalk. Yep. Right, and close I want a lot of steps in there, and children are one of those steps. And but also you should plan on being able to have a way of solving problems. So when I have a lot of younger friends, young coach friends who are getting married, right, in the last 5 years or so, and I take my wisdom and I'm like, tell me 2 things. Tell me, are you guys having sex? Are you intimate? How are you intimate? I don't want to know the details, but show me how. Like, when you have a fight, do you guys how do you show affection to each other? Because if that's already gone or not working, do not get married. And the second thing I say is, there's that physical touch piece, right? The second thing I say is, how do you guys solve problems? Tell me about your last fight. So I want to make sure that those pieces we're meta about that. And that just means we just need to talk about it. You don't have to get it right. We just have to have a schema to talk about that. How do we talk about our feelings? In our classes, we get together. We all shake hands. We make friends. We've trained together for 10 years, but we're still going to shake hands. Good morning. How are you? What's happening? What's happening in the world? How's everyone feeling? And then we pull everyone together, and we talk about what was great, what didn't work, what are you worried about, what'd you feel? And we have this kind of bookends where the process is built in, so you don't have to make another decision. You don't have to overcome some entropy or engage. And that's what you have to do with your life. You have to set, and especially if you're going to run your own business, you're a crazy person. You are a maniac to do this. And so you better have these structures where you don't have to, we have this thing called the feelings meeting.
That I have it literally written down. You mentioned that on the Savant podcast, and I wanted to know what this is.
The feelings meeting came about where we realized that we were business partners, and we were still husband and wife, but we were business partners and best friends, but we were solving personal relationships when we were exhausted with children and 2 businesses at the end of the night. And at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not my best self. 11 o'clock at night, I don't want to talk about my feelings. I want to dissociate and drift off, right? And what the feelings meeting did for us was give us an opportunity and a place and a structure to talk about our feelings.
Is this a recurring meeting?
Mm-hmm. Once a week. And, sometimes it's in the sauna. Now it's a little less, COVID made things a little weird. But we'd go out to dinner once a week. We have Juliet's parents live a mile from us, which is amazing. But now our kids are old enough to stay alone. But we just sit down, and sometimes there's only sparkling water, and sometimes I'd be like, I need a drink, And we're not big drinkers, but man.
What's your go-to?
Tequila's pretty great.
Yeah, very paleo.
I lost tequila for a while, back into tequila. But one of the places where I may send you, there's this drink called the After Fairy, which has muddled strawberries and mint and vodka and
sounds amazing.
Coconut. It's unbelievable. But I put this big-ass After Fairy. It's like in a 14-pound rocks glass. And I say, we're like, okay, go. And the only rules are you can't be defensive. You just have to listen. And sometimes there's nothing to talk about. I'm doing great. I really appreciate you. And sometimes they're like, hey, I don't think we're handling that well, or I didn't do a great job on that, or this is really hurting my feelings or not making me feel, or it's not, this thing that we're doing is not getting us where we need to be. And having that framework where you can talk about process is the same fucking thing we've done with every professional team I've ever worked with. You know, right now, if you're listening to this and you haven't done this already, there's a documentary called All or Nothing. I think it's on Amazon Prime. It's about the 2017 All Blacks, which happens to be a team I work with, and I happened to get involved with them in 2017. Nick Gill's their strength and conditioning coach. All Blacks are TRS users. I'm such a fan of them as an organization. There is no ego. There is only humility. There is only, I'm afraid of letting the team down. And you have some of the greatest, fiercest warriors battling on the planet, talking, missing their first start because they'd rather be home with their newborn baby, or the baby's being born. And the coaching staff is like who we are as people and how we solve problems. The permission to talk about process. They're not mired down in process. They go do the basics. They do everything better than everyone else does. They're the like winningest crew in history, except for UNC soccer, right? And so, but when you watch that, if you brought that level of vulnerability and process and egolessness to everything you did in all the relationships, I guarantee you're going to feel closer to your friends. You'll have better relationships with the people you train and coach. And it doesn't mean you can't be the best in the world and fucking savage and cut someone's throat when it's time to cut their throat.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying be soft, but I'm just saying own your part. And I've actually seen that with, I get to work with sometimes the military. And I'm not trying to fetishize the military in any way, but I have seen an elite group do a skill and come back and then watched everyone own every fuck up. Right? So the feedback. So imagine we're on a team sport, and our team sport is a 3-station rotation or a deadlift thing, and then we finish, and they're like, I could have done better, lost my concentration. Think about the process there instead of just moving on to the next thing.
I can only say this to male entrepreneurs because I'm a male and an entrepreneur, but the ones that I work with, I talk about you have caveman mode and communication mode. Caveman mode is, cavemen didn't really communicate. They grunted, but they just went out and fucking killed things. They clubbed saber-tooth tigers, and they killed other members that were weak, and they brought back the food. And you have that caveman mode as a business owner where you have to go and get shit done. But then there also is this communication mode you absolutely have to have. I don't care if it's an employee or your significant other or yourself internally, because if there's no communication in there, like, you know what happens when someone doesn't hear their own, kid doesn't communicate with people, they're in solitary confinement. You've seen the tests that are done with animals. They go fucking insane. Yeah. No communication with the people that you interact with. And the deep level communication, not like, hey, blah, 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 and then passing, like actual deep discuss communication, you will go fucking nuts. I don't care what it is you're doing. You'll do a poor job at it.
Here's the pro tip as a business owner or a friend. If you have some resistance about talking to someone, you got to talk to them. If you're like, I don't want to have that conversation,
lean into the thing you already have.
That's easy to say, lean into the challenge.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. I'm like, you have to pick up the phone and tell the member who's at 5:30 in the morning, who's being a dick because the gym is closed down or he thinks he's elite. You need to call him and tell him it's not okay. It's not okay to make everyone feel that way. It's not okay to throw a tantrum, and that if you don't change, he's going to leave. You'll kick him out of your gym. And he's like, but I'm the best athlete. It doesn't matter. You're a dick. And that's a really difficult conversation to have. And I see people, tiptoe. And if you've got an employee who's not cutting it, you get a chance to help them get it right, or, not. And that in so much is, man, I need to talk about my feelings. And if you're feeling that moment where you're like, I don't want to have this conversation, then you need to pick up the phone. And now I actually kind of like, I get to have those conversations, like if there's something going on, like I'm the pit bull of the company. I'm like, no problem. I'll tell people, because I'm like, this is a great opportunity to destroy my sense of self-importance and, be honest with someone. And that's tricky.
I want to talk about, I mentioned this to you earlier, I didn't really understand the ripple effect that you had. I remember you had the tight blue polo t-shirt on, and you were giving one of your first SME lectures that made it onto the CrossFit, and you had hair back then.
Oh, man.
And
that was so hopeful.
This was, and you opened your gym and then simultaneously you went through PT school, and you did all that. But then, I'm learning all these, obviously, this thing has exploded to not only sports groups and maybe elite military and the All Blacks and presidential administrations. How does it ripple effect like that? Because at some point you're just, Mark Ripito, fucking Brian McKenzie. These are all great SMEs that had great things to say, and they were all a part of this ecosystem we were all in. You exploded out of that solar system more than anybody else. And was it the 365 videos? Was it the book? Like, what was it that allowed you to catapult to that level? Because there's no one else to that degree that was in that SME world. And there was a lot of opportunity for Rob Wolf and everyone else to have that same effect.
Well, I appreciate that. What I'll say is that the original group, Greg Glassman really gathered up. He could spot talent. He had a really knack for spotting talent. And if you even go further back with Dan John and what's Mark from Salt Lake City? Mark Twight.
Yeah, Jim Jones.
So just if you look at Jim Jones and some of those guys, man, there are so many talented people who got sucked in. Mike Bergner. Mike Rutherford was in there early on, the Martins. There's just really incredible people. And if you look today, what Brian's done is amazing. John Wellborn is still out there slaying, there was a long time ago, I did a little talk at a CrossFit trainer gathering. And I knew early on that the thing I was interested in was position, recovery, positional restoration, performance, and the unifying field theory around that is how does the body work? And then I had all these expert friends, who are experts in powerlifting and and all these things, but the unifying thing is the knee. It's involved in all those things. So I made this joke. I was like, I wish I was the running guy or the Olympic lifting guy, but I'm the stretching guy. And everyone's like, ha ha ha. And I was like, you don't understand. This is like, I wanted to be the stretching guy. And I think
because all these other guys need me.
They're going to need me. I'm the universal thing, right? You remember the 10 physical general characteristics of fitness? Well, it turns out flexibility was one of the ones. It was an old word. But which one of those impacts the rest of them? There's only one, flexibility. Like, you want to lose power, don't have full position. Want to not be agile, so I was
you wanted to pull a string and unravel the whole thing.
That's the string. It's you can buffer it for a long time. And then I'll tell you, some of this 100% is being a maniac. I'm pretty good at communicating. I love to teach. I've been teaching complex motor skills to adults since I was 14. That's when I started teaching whitewater kayaking. My mom is a professor. I sat in the back of every lecture she had because she was a working mom, and my mom was like a circus star professor. She finished her career at Denver University. She was professor of the year a million times.
Is your mom still with us?
Yeah, and she is the most amazing lecturer of all time. And
what
really,
makes her so good?
Her ability to synthesize and integrate information. So my whole shtick is pattern recognition and synthesis. Like, I can aggregate disparate ideas very fast and see with the overlap. That's the pattern recognition part. And so suddenly, imagine why CrossFit really made sense to me, because I was like, oh, Olympic lifting, gymnastics, running, like barbell work, like how's it all related? Why does this make this? Where are the relationships? How do, what's the synthesis? Suddenly I was like, oh, I just see how all these pieces fit together. The shoulder does this, it does this, right? And so one of the things that I appreciate is that, yes, I'm probably a decent coach, and then I also hit the right. YouTube was barely a thing when we started.
I know you always give it right place, right time. You use that line all the fucking time. But
also, I have this thing called work pain tolerance, and my wife and I have phenomenal, world-class work pain tolerance, which means we can delay gratification and outwork you. And I don't want to outwork you. I'm probably very lazy. But when it's time to go, it means I'm teaching a class, 2 classes back to back in Dallas, and I'm going to fly back late at night. My wife has our both kids, and she's an attorney, and we're running the gym, and we've got, and then I go sleep on my table in my office, and then coach the 5:30 a.m. class on Monday.
That's what I call juggling chainsaws. Oh. There's some people that are amazing at juggling chainsaws. Now, the thing with juggling chainsaws,
I cut all my hair off.
You'll always, one will slip at some point. And some people are skillful like yourself, where just a little nick, tis but the flesh wound. And other times it takes your fucking arm off for people who are not skilled.
You die, and you employed all the relationships around you. And I think one of the things that, I remember laying in bed with Juliet. Supple Leopard had come out. Big success. We got really lucky. It's a good book. And I was like, what if this is all I do? this is it. I'm done. I don't have anything else to say. And she was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, that's the old self, right? Like the old drive, achieve. And, I didn't go on vacation. I wrote the book. We spent a ton of time seeing. I think we're lucky. I'm lucky enough in that I could see the future a little bit. Like I'm like, oh, I see the truth of it. We're going there. When I found CrossFit, I was like, oh, that's the thing. Like it wasn't even a phenomenon yet. It was like there were 5 gyms in the world. It was like there was a video on the early site when I was following it from a guy from ShivWorks. And he had like worked in like gangs and prisons and was an expert knife fighter.
Like actual shivs.
Like shivving people. And I remember practicing like knife moves because it was on the CrossFit site. And Juliet's like, what is going on with this site? I was like, I don't know, but it's kicking my ass and I'm learning how to knife fight. It's pretty cool. And there's this thing called paleo. She's like, I just Googled that.
That should have been a SME.
Pretty much was. And so here we are. I can outwork everyone. I'm really good at pattern recognition, communicating. And then also, I am really not threatened by other people's success. And so I am really good at being an ally to your success. Like that's one of the things that inspires me. I was never a person who got super down when we lost. I got down when I sucked. I hate sucking. Hate it. But losing, if you beat me, man, good job. You beat me. You deserve it, right? You're more talented than I am or outworked me, man, that's yours. And that just motivates me. And if you're really fast, I'm like, I could be that fast. I'm just have enough ego all the time where I'm like, well, I can do what you can do. What'd you do? I can do that. And I think I was long enough and an ally enough and friendly enough and helped enough people and did that long enough where I wasn't a dick in the space and didn't cut my own throat and didn't shit talk and I tried to help people. And lo and behold, that is the process. The glacial pace is the breakneck pace. And luck, serendipity, ego, right woman, who knows what I've recently started saying, I was like, no one thing changes everything. Everything changes the one thing. So does the book matter? Yes. Having a good gym matter, superstar coaches, the right partner, right? Just keep CrossFit's ascending. Like all of those things help the one thing, and that one thing was my career.
The business side of me, I was asking myself the same question. Like, why is he rippled past the rest? And I came to this very similar conclusion. You have the product and service that everyone that plays in functional fitness or plays in Olympic weightlifting or plays in enduro land needs. Soft tissue work, being able to do it, and being able to do it themselves, right? That is like.
Let me tell you a story. This will say it also. George St. Pierre is a good friend of ours, and he tore his first ACL, hit a non-contact ACL tear, and I can talk about this because he's a friend. And his staff called his people and were like, hey, George needs to see you because he tore his ACL. And then I didn't hear anything. And I called back and they were like, he's worked it out. And I was like, cool, let me know, I'm here. And he tore his second ACL. And then they were like, George is coming. Like, does Tuesday work for you, right? And so I see people because they're losing, or I see people because they're hurting or in pain or injured. And that means something isn't working anymore, right? And so I'm really good, again, pattern recognition of spotting where I think we can help. So the job I don't want to do is the day-to-day coaching of the elite athlete. The thing I'm really good at is synthesizing and helping the coaching staff spot those blind spots, right? That's my favorite thing in the world, to make everyone else look better, to come into a program and not be trying to take someone's job, but to say, hey, here's how you think you can get better at your job. And on those two things, I'll get you eventually, because what you're going to eventually do isn't going to work for you anymore, or what you're going to do isn't work for you and you lose or got injured. So at some point, I'm like, meet me. I'm Kelly Starrett.
I got two things. I want to go jump back to something you said. You were talking about your mom and what a great teacher she is. And the first thing, so my marketing brand, I remember watching your videos, and I remember, why is he not leading with, okay, would you like better ankle flexion? Would you like not have to put on your wooden shoes every time you squat? This is how you fix it. But you never did. You always would lean in with shit I would have to look up. And I'm an exercise phys major, and I'm like, he's using some jargon sometimes that people are never going to watch this, but you tweaked the nipple. You just teased them enough. You foreplayed the jargon enough to where people were intrigued by it, but they didn't feel dumb.
How about this? Let me reframe that for you. You may be right about that. And I definitely struggle to not use jargon, because
I think it played to your strength.
It
got me researching it past of your video.
It is the right word. So I'm not trying to use some fake word. I'm trying to use the right word. And it's not your word that you don't know yet. But underneath that is I'm talking up to you. I think you're smart enough to figure it out. I think you're smart enough to come along on the trip with me. And I assume, and look, I have sometimes super anxiety. Remember that time, Kelly, where you spoke to 500 doctors at the big osteopathic convention? So I'm like, okay, no pressure here. Or the time where I stood in front of every strength and conditioning coach in the NFL for 3 hours. Remember that? I'm not the best person in the room. So what I walk into the room and say is, there's no way I have more, experience or better than these people, but no one has my experience and can see what I can see. And so what I've always done is said, I think you can come up to where I am. I never talk down to anyone in the videos. And there's a fine line between overshooting,
Sure.
right? There's 2 physios named Bob and Brad right now who are killing it. They're just like a couple of guys in their late 50s, early 60s.
They're YouTubing, killing it.
YouTubing, killing it. Like the Bob and Brad show. And they're like Bob and Brad, famous physical therapists. And they just became aware of this generation of like me. I was on their podcast. They're super nice guys. But they're like, we just discovered, and you had a book, and you made these products, and your stuff works, and I haven't been able to ever squat below parallel, and this is crazy. And I was like, I know, it's so weird, right? Because it is easy to get siloed. And those guys speak to a whole group of people I'm never going to talk to. Those are not my people. It's okay. And when I got to that place where I appreciated that some coaches are going to really like you, some of our athletes are really going to like working with you, and they're going to really like working with me, and thank goodness we have multiple voices and multiple perspectives. So, how is it that we got there? I'm really good at my job. I'm really good at understanding this one vertical, and I'm really interested in how all those things. I'm a savage generalist. I am the greatest generalist you ever met. I know a little bit about everything. I know how it relates. In this one vertical, I'm pretty deep on that thing, but I'm also super curious, and there is no edge to my life. So my training, my friends, my professional work, my day-to-day job, it's all the same job. All I'm talking about is how do we go faster, how do we live longer, how do we live less pain, and then I rinse, wash, repeat, rinse, wash, repeat, rinse, wash, repeat. And then my friends are like, come on in, here's England national soccer team, right? And suddenly I'm like, oh, man, here's a new huge data set. Here is another group. And suddenly everyone's like, here's our dirty laundry. And I'm like, wow, who gets to see this dirty laundry? And then I get to make a whole bunch of different, sets of inferences. And to be totally honest, just so we're super clear, this is so esoteric. Sir Francis Bacon is the father of the scientific method. And the scientific method is induction, understanding patterns through large data sets. That is what it's about. It's about observation. Tell me what job we're all in right now. It is about observation through large data sets. What's the best practices? How do we feed the most people? How do we have the most people have the most durable back squat hinge position? That's what we're doing. So I feel really blessed. Early in physical therapy, I think I hit the jackpot because and I used to do this thing, I was like, look, if I was a physical therapist and I saw 8 patients a day, 1 hour time, and that's not usually the case, but I got to spend 8 hours. How long does it take? I can see 40 people a week. That's 2 classes, maybe. Just 2 hours. So in 2 hours of personal small group training, I have crushed the pattern recognition of a whole week of work as a physical therapist. So imagine I'm doing this deep dive physical therapy thing, and simultaneously I'm running 20 classes a week. I'm running 30 classes a week. I'm running 110 classes a week, right? And then I have other coaches, and I'm in their same room, and I'm coaching and watching them coach. And then all of a sudden, you cannot keep up with the pattern recognition, the volume of data sets that I have access to. And that's why working as a team or working with a group is magical.
What was the moment, because you went from, again, doing the SME stuff with CrossFit, what was the first contract or the call you got from another group where you're like, oh my God, I've taken the first step outside of this CrossFit realm? What was that first contract or gig you got?
That's hard to say. I think things started to accelerate a little bit, definitely with the Mobility Project. But turns out everyone likes to train. People like to exercise, and exercise is something everyone knows they should do. So suddenly, people at Google are like, hey, we're huge fans. Can you come talk to us? And I was like, oh, sure. That's
and obviously functional fitness, the complexity of exercise going up makes you a necessity.
What I knew something was happening, and I was on, because people understand that, when you're a CrossFitter, that means different things now. Before, it was like I was untouchable. right? I was part of the CrossFit cult who would cut your throat if you swung a kettlebell less than over your head, right? I mean, we were...
And you had a real following. I mean, I don't know what your personal relationship is. I remember when Ryan DeBell started his Movement Fix courses, I remember people, we sent some coaches to him when he came to Charlotte. I remember people like going up to his face and letting them know that they thought he was a Kelly Starrett ripoff. And this poor bastard just trying to carve out his little corner of the fucking world.
No. Well, I'd like to come back to that because I think there's some really powerful lessons there because he's a fine human. I remember being invited to speak at Perform Better, which is a completely separate ecosystem.
Sure.
And if you're a CrossFitter, you know who the Perform Better people are.
Get yourself some bands. They make the little cones. They make.
And there's some really smart coaches involved with that process, and in that group. And I was able. Chris Poyer invited me. He's the founder, and inventor, owner, CEO of, and he was generous enough to say, "I want you to come speak at our big thing in Rhode Island."
And he found you via
internet.
YouTube.
Coaches, some young coach was like, maybe it was Mike Boyle, was like, I think you should have this guy on. Because Mike Boyle, who is a genius and has been holding the door open for a generation of us, whether you're a CrossFitter, non-CrossFitter, the generosity of these senior statespersons, coaches, men and women, who are like, this was a young person of talent, we should identify them and see what they're about. Mike invited me into his gym to talk to his staff. Like, here, I think you have something important to say. Here's my staff. Like, that is a sign of such badassery and power, and like,
especially because you had the CrossFit label on.
Oh, so I remember. And I think I mentioned this. I'm in this gigantic party at Chris's house, and I'm the only CrossFitter there. And it's well known that I'm the first CrossFitter to ever speak to this group. And Greg Cook is part of that group, and mentors and some guys coming to me at this party, and they're like, "Don't worry, you're not alone here." And I was like,
I'm a fitter.
That's right. So that was it was like, and I was starting to be asked to work with the military more, and other teams were reaching out. And what I just started to see was that, there's a lot of people who are needing this problem, and CrossFit was such a good GPP methodology and has become since even more sophisticated than it was. But again, when I originally said CrossFit, what I meant was, can you swing kettlebells? Can you swing dumbbells? Can you handle barbells? Can you do Olympic lifting? Can you do some basic gymnastic stuff? And can you run and row, right? That, like, you have to be skilled at that. And I think we all had massive beginner gains. So there's that. And then, just circle back to the Movement Fix. Early on, it's easy to get people's attention by criticizing the old people. That's super easy. I think that is a cheap shot. And I want people
creating polarizing content for the sake of getting the lightning rod.
It's just easy to criticize someone. And offer no solutions, right? And I think my beef with early on was, and I'm sure I did it initially, but it was aware. I probably didn't do it as well as I could have, but I was pretty conscious as I never punched down. I never took cheap shots on people. In fact, it was Greg Cook of the FMS who said, hey, I heard you defend FMS and talk about it in a way I heard some talk about it. Like, a lot of people just like, I can shit on this because I'm like, you didn't author that. You don't have, what are you doing?
Sure.
You haven't done sweet fuck all. And so anytime now when someone comes out and is like, bleh, then you should have red flags about that. Because what you should be always asking is, once again, are they maybe right about that? So if someone's system has interference patterns with my system or my way of thinking, every interference point is a point of curiosity and interest and real opportunity. Why are we seeing things differently? Because Buckminster Fuller has this idea of mutually accommodating systems, which means it doesn't matter what your tools or techniques or language is, it drops right in. So suddenly you're like, CrossFit and yoga, they're the same. CrossFit and Pilates, it's the same, right? Olympic lifting, gymnastics, you're like, oh, it's the same. Because there's no one saying one thing and it's the same. And when you start to realize that, then all of a sudden you can just drop into any system, any, track and field, Olympic, like I'm just like, oh, the shoulder's the shoulder. And so when you hear someone being like, bleh, then you should be like, I wonder why they're so insecure in their own model that this is the only way they can get attention. You should see that absolutely as a juvenile beginner operating system, because the world's best never do that. They don't ever talk shit. They just show what they're doing. It's more interesting just to show what we think is working, or they highlight what they love, right?
Speaking of ripples, and I don't know if you saw this inside of our entrepreneurial support group, I believe it was Christy dropped it. you got a huge call out on JRE, on the Joe Rogan podcast. They pulled you up on the TV. They pulled the website up. Is this news to you?
No.
Okay.
Joe's a friend.
Okay. So you're little in your GSP. You're a few contact points away. Like I think about how big you are, and then I
was on GRE, right? I was on Joe's show at like episode 365.
You were on JRE?
Yeah.
How did I not find that in any of my research?
The bottom line is, all of these super megastars are all really busy, and just do your work. Like every once in a while, someone slides into your DMs. I slide into other people's DMs. Hey, I'm such a fan.
Yeah.
I see you follow me. I just want you to know I'm here if you ever need help.
Did you watch Frazier's? His JRE interview?
Yeah.
There was a lot of upset CrossFit affiliate brethren around it about it. They didn't think he portrayed it much, and I gotta imagine.
I watched your breakdown of it.
Yeah. I'm really curious because obviously I did not see your JRE at all. Deuce, that's what we're doing on the way back on the plane.
No, you can't watch it. Joe got super baked, and I had just slammed a bulletproof coffee, and we missed each other for like the first hour and a half. It was really, we were operating at 2 speeds. My crackhead monkey brain was like, I'm on Joe Rogan, let's go.
Yeah.
And hey, give me that caffeine and butter shot.
What's that like? Is that because people are giving Matt shit about his thing? I was like, I can't even imagine mentally what I'd be trying to do with myself as a human being on. It's such a crazy thing to be on.
Practice. It is crazy to be on. I've never met Matt. I think Matt, what I'll say is Matt figured out a way for him to be very successful. And that's not the way I would necessarily train or compete. He knows himself so well that he knew what he needed to do and how to do it.
It's pretty rare that a games athlete that you don't know.
I just never met him. I've worked with just about everyone.
Yeah.
I put my hands on a lot of CrossFit.
He very much seems like a lone wolf kind of guy.
Yeah, just worked out, and we were just in different circles. And again, he's very successful. What a champ. I think what we always want to do is say, well, what system did this person come out of? Why did they make the decision? Those are the really interesting questions. Whether you like Matt or not is irrelevant. Matt is really great. There's so many things that we should be taking about his practice and how he did it. And, the tight relationship he had with his partner. Sammy is one of the kindest people ever. Like, you should be looking at, wow, the number one relationship that kept the whole thing going, he fed like it was a hungry wolf. You know what I mean? Like, that's really, I don't think anyone's talked about that relationship as being like such a foundation to his success. Like, he just worshiped Sammy and took care of Sammy, and Sammy took care of him. Like, I was like, that's pretty simple.
I think the most interesting thing about him is he's going to create the paradigm and the framework because he's the first one to ever retire and then continue in whatever the rest of his life looks like. It's not just I want to be Matt Frazier and win the CrossFit Games now for an up and coming person. It's I want to then ascend to whatever that is because. You look at he's done his thing and he's got some other companies and stuff. And I always thought this with games that I didn't know anyone or anything like that. But I was like, you have this amazing moment in time, and for most of those people, it's a quick moment in time.
Do not know how to monetize it afterwards.
Correct, yeah. And I mean, just like NFL players don't know how to manage their money when they're in it, and that's why so many end up broke. And you see these 30 for 30s on them. In your experience in watching, I hate saying the word kids, but do they, when they're in the moment, do you think they understand it or they're just so locked on the prize?
Depends how old you are.
Yeah.
And what your previous experience is. It's big. And, look at what Morning Chalk Up's been doing, talking about all the social media grossness. Like, that's gross. To be a woman, and it's just disgusting. I have a comment. I will never, ever like or comment on one of the athletes I follow who has, is in her, selling something or in like sexy socks or something. I just don't do it. I don't feed that wolf. What I'll say is it's complicated and you need to make a living. And let me just frame this for everyone because it's so easy to have, I have a business. It's so easy to be like, that's not what I do. I have a ton of Red Bull friends, like so many Red Bull athletes who Red Bull supports them, gives them athletic support, trains them, media attention, videos. They support esoteric sports, and it's a sugar company. Red Bull's not great. It's not a great product. It's a real problem. There's dissonance. And I'm like, wouldn't it be great if you could just say no to Red Bull? And then my wife and I met because of Camel cigarettes. because Camel South Africa sponsored our World Championships, and Camel was written all over everything. And guess who had zero compunction when I was a 24-year-old kid?
You had Joe Cool everywhere.
Man, I was like, Camel's the best. I mean, yeah, we're just killing people, but I met my wife, and I'm in Chile, so it's a slippery slope as an athlete who's broke and doesn't have many choices. How do I feed myself? I do really appreciate the chutzpah and the sense of self-identity that Matt could have gone as long as he wanted. I don't know if his body was doing something different. Who knows? It doesn't matter. The fact that he was like, I got out of this what I need, so much respect. And to your point, I think we haven't done a good job of laying the breadcrumbs for what do I do afterwards, right? Camille, look at all the past champions, and it is, Rich loves to train. So you have to understand about Rich, and Rich is a good friend of mine. He will train this way because it's how he self-medicates and how he loves to train because it's what he loves to do. Rich is the greatest training partner, one of the greatest training partners I've ever had because he's down to do whatever you want to do. He's down at any time in the day. Like we would train in the morning. I'm
like
coaching his
7-Eleven.
place. 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's like, man, I think about going to the gym. I'm like, good, let's go do some rowing and some heavy cleans. He's like, I'm so in. And like, it's the two of us at 11 o'clock at night just training in this gym. And I'm like, dude, this is the greatest, right? I did this workout with him and Dan Bailey once where it was after dinner. We went out to the gym, and I was like, we're going to go till someone wants to stop. And I was like, what am I doing? And it was like heavy cleans with a med ball.
You're like, so we're going until I say we're going to stop.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right. I'm bored. Yeah, you guys bored? I'm bored. I'm good. You guys good? And it was so great. They did way more reps than I did. They did way faster than I did. And then we're all at one point, we're like, good. So you have to understand that, Rich is one of the few people who has created maybe not business lines that are so clearly, but Mayhem is a machine, an incredible machine.
It's a brand.
What he's doing is unbelievable. And if you have to look at Training with Rich as a program, all of these other things that he does, and that he has created a second life. Every professional athlete's going to retire twice. You're going to retire from your sport, and then you have to retire from the job you did after your sport, because very few of them ever make enough money to really retire.
Completely
You just don't.
it
Takes so much money to do that. Forrest Griffin, another fighter, is a friend of ours, and someone was interviewing him, and they were like, "What's it like to be a millionaire?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm a millionaire. I have a few millions. That's not the same thing as being a millionaire. That's not the same thing. He still drives the car that Dana gave him from winning Ultimate Fighter, which is like a Scion XB. He drives that still, right? He has a Range Rover and lives in a house in Vegas, but he still drives that car, and he still works. So what I really appreciate that Matt did, and I think Matt actually could have done it better, he could have taken his last year and launched a channel with Sammy, Feeding the Frasers, and started, but also that guy was really busy doing something else, right? Being the best in the world. But what we should be looking at is, who he partnered with. Steffi and Hayden are two of the greatest people on the planet of hybrid athletics. He went right to them. They've created this super, thing. And those guys are great humans. And then the breadcrumb is, if you're a champion, you should be figuring out how to do that. Annie always had a gym. I think it's easy to forget that Annie owned CrossFit, Reykjavik. And so she always had a kind of a plan in the background. But a lot of people don't. And that is a testament to how young our sport was, and that we're making the same mistakes 1,000 times, that we're not using this opportunity to set ourselves up for another business or seed something else.
I've been really interested watching that business model. I don't want to say easy, and I don't mean it like that, but the one that makes the most sense for those individuals is the online programming model, and it's
so competitive.
It's super competitive.
And people are really good at it.
Oh yeah, I'm going up after you. As the next month I'm doing Portland. I'm gonna be going up there to see street parking. Right, 30,000 people enrolled per month in their online program. It's just insane to see those kind of things. But the one thing that's very cool, it means there's more autonomous fitnessers in the world. Yeah. Because previously, you just get a gym. A gym is when you need that coaching one-on-one, which there's so many of us do. But the fact that online programming has really exploded, and I don't even just give the hat tip to 2020 and COVID and the pandemic, but it's just more that there are more self-aware fitnessers, because there were 16,000 little mini education centers.
Yeah, like I don't always need someone to teach me a front squat.
Yeah,
I'm good. Right, you're absolutely right, and it's something that we always did at the gym was where I was always like, look, you have to have a barbell and some kettlebells and a rower at home. It takes this much space in your house, but you have to have that autonomy. So come to the gym when you need coaching and inspiration and community, but also you need to fucking grind it out a little bit on your own. Like we've taught you to do this, and that was CrossFit's mission from day one. So now expand on that. We have Rogue, who can feed the beast all the time with our home kit, right? And then look at the expression of Jason Khalipa. NC Fit is great programming. You look at Mayhem, great programming, street parking. Like, there are really good, dense programs out there if you know enough. And people are dangerous enough. And I mean dangerous enough, they're not going to hurt themselves. I mean, like, they know how to swing a kettlebell and do a burpee. Like, pump the brakes. So really, it gets to the next question is, what are we coming to the gym for? What are the opportunities there? Why are people there? They're coming there for community and really world-class coaching.
Yeah,
that's right. And to your point also, it really does lead. It's harder and harder and harder, because if all of these former champions have their online programming, Ben Smith and everyone else, you now are in an attention economy, and you either have to have some bona fides or shout at the system. I was like, oh, Tia's in this game now, and with Shane, and I was like, whew. Like,
you need to carve out a niche that is so that they can't touch, because they're not that. If you want to have that, like if you wanted to start a program for guys who can clean but they can't clean with the right wrist.
Dude, that is exactly right.
There we go.
And look what Miranda did. Yeah. She went deep on Facebook community, they're so deep on the chats on serving this demographic of working families, and they killed it.
Their newest thing, I don't know if you've seen the Office skits that Julian writes. He writes legit comedic. They look like The Office. Good. It's because comedy was one thing from a marketing perspective that fitness, no business in fitness ever really latched onto. When we think of the majority of the videos
it's so serious.
We enjoy on the internet, the ones that don't promote rage and anger, they're comedy. They make us laugh. There has not really been a fitness brand besides maybe Bro Science, but that wasn't really fitness. That was just, parody, that has really been able to embody comedy. And I'll text Miranda, I'm like, that last skit literally had me almost piss myself.
It's so good.
It's amazing.
We really, it's one of the ways that everyone can hear this, that you can show your personality. Like, all the smart people I know are wickedly funny. Yeah. They're dry and funny, and they can take the piss and give the piss. And that's not shit talking. That's different, right? It's like, this is all really funny, and there are so many places. And even one of the allegories for this is watching April Fools. I do enjoy fitness has a unique take on April Fools. Everyone tries to do something, and thank goodness there's more humor in this, because it really, sometimes I'm like, oh, really? We're going to 78.2% of your one rep max on a Thursday, in October. Okay. Like A, B,
Yeah.
And I think we sucked out the joy out of the gym for a minute. We got so serious. And I think that is a normal expression of the system. I don't think that was an error. I think that's just the system running its
loose,
thing.
It gets real tight.
That's right. Now we're so sophisticated. And I'm like, okay. Remember when it was just fun to go mess around the gym for an hour, not do your 17 programs and stay on your thing? I was just on a friend's podcast, Matt Vincent, and I was like, I challenged all the coaches who are listening to do this. Some coach that you're friends with and work out with, they're going to do the cooking, and you're going to eat whatever they cook, and shut up. And it doesn't matter. It's not going to ruin your program, and you're not going to get off your cycle. Just do whatever it is. And if they're like, we're doing cable crossovers and bench press, all the sets, do it. Like, the things you hate, we're rowing 2x20K? Okay. All right, I didn't realize we're doing that today. I'm going to smoke you when it's my turn. But shut up and be coached, and just go for a ride. Go play around.
It's like programming horse.
Yeah.
You take a shot, I take a shot. Yeah.
I think difficult to make long. The knock on CrossFit forever was that it was like, isn't just a bunch of random shit. I love Joe being all like, oh, isn't just CrossFit just random? Jillian Michaels, like, you just do 10 moves. I was like, it's not Iyengar, not Iyengar. It's what is the hot yoga, stinky yoga?
The hot one, you?
Yeah, the guy.
The horrible. That's Arikiana, not Arikiana. Bikram. Bikram, that's it.
People love Bikram because it was the same 10 moves in the same sequence. And then you were like, I could be really good at these 10 moves. I can practice. That's not what it is. A good yoga coach comes in and was like, oh, I see you sucking on rotation, or you're sucking hip extension. Guess what we're doing today? Suck it, right? That's why yoga is one of the best things. It's one of the coached environments. But what they did was rip out all the coaching out of the Bikram, right? You got coaching the sequences. That happens in CrossFit a little bit. It happens in the gym a little bit, where we're so serious and we need to get so much density. This is what people say the best hour of the day. So let's get back to playing and exposing a little bit more, especially if we're in GPP kind of land, where it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter.
I find, because I have to play on the other side of that, I work with a gym that there's a little bit too much, there's play in the gym, and that play extends over into the business side. And listen, at the end of the day, there's a P&L at the end of the day, you know? So as long as the play doesn't interfere with, you know, like I used to hate the open because I'd have a client, and for 5 fucking weeks out of the year, 5 weeks, which is not
can
small,
we just, thank you. Yeah, the open, born on the back of small CrossFit gyms who felt bullied and compelled and gave their clients rhabdo because it was an infinite workout that they had to finish. You're going to do 10,000 burpees and thrusters, and we sent 2 people to the hospital. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no way to prevent that. So I agree with that. You know, one of the things I tell I have 2 daughters. One's 16, one's 13.
Did you purposely name them after states?
No. You dick. Georgia is Juliet's grandmother.
Okay.
And Carol is my grandmother.
Okay.
So they're both
after grandmas.
After grandmas.
And the grandmas were named after states.
After states. That's right. In fact, I met Juliet and literally we made out, and then like that first night she's like, if we have a daughter, we're naming her Georgia. And I was like, all right.
Boom.
Good talk. And that's true. I tell them that smart girls have the most fun. And what that means is handle your work, play a perfect game, break all the rules. Everyone will cut you all the slack. If you have A's and you're interested and pay attention and do what you need to do, then you can take all the time off and get all the extensions and do whatever you need and bend the rules. So in business, you have to handle the basics. Then you can have all the fun. And I think people want to put it the other way around. And it works for a while until it doesn't work anymore, right?
In 2020, we talked about this when we did the Zoom podcast. The rise of digital, right? And you guys have and I know this was post the closing of San Francisco, CrossFit San Francisco, but you guys were making content for the MobilityWOD and then the Ready State like crazy. You guys could have turned on some kind of remote fitness video kind of scenario. Sure. The one thing that caught me off guard, a lot of CrossFit affiliates they didn't like the digital thing. And then there was a reminder for those of us that come from old school. I found CrossFit in 05, 06. CrossFit started as an online remote program, an online fitness program, and then it became a brick and mortar. Everyone was like, "Oh, we were all brick and mortars. CrossFit's brick and mortar, and now all these online programming people." I'm like, no, brother, it was the wrong. I know you maybe haven't been here long enough. Let me get the history.
You were
book
doing
for you.
it by yourself.
Yeah,
in a garage,
100%. And then you were just making internet friends with James Fitzgerald and APT.
There was 3 boxes.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But with where it is now with digital, and obviously that's what the Ready States. You guys are all digital. Are you guys in person with any functions yet or any seminars?
We have, we've put, I think, close to 20,000 people through our level 1 course. We did
Since inception?
Since inception.
Okay.
We've been doing we've just moved our 102, our assessment course. We have a formal assessment course. That now is a 6-week course where you get dripped out and then you have office hours with us once a week. And so it's kind of a hybrid. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then what we'll do as soon as we can, we will do some kind of hybrid where because right now, like for example, we shut our 102 cohort off at 60 athletes, 60 coaches, because we just were like, we want it to be so dense and they can, you start to become unmanageable at scale. But probably a third are international or more, all over the world. And because we are digital international, we can capture everyone who couldn't come travel to, because it's so expensive. So I think we have 12 countries represented right now in our current cohort.
How would you grade your digital product versus if you could go in person and you could scale yourself to go to New Delhi, whatever?
That's a really good question. Ideally, one of my first pain points with CrossFit was that I had this 1-day course, and it was the #1 SME killed, and I had too much to talk about in one day. And it was too much. It was
Did you push for it to make it 2 days, the level 1 and 2?
And I really pushed for it, and they were not into it. And I think, for whatever reason, I can only speculate, money being probably a large driver. It was a big cash cow.
It was a 2-day. You could have charged the same amount that they do per the level 1.
I usually taught one on Saturday and one on Sunday, right? So I did these 2 things back to back. But I was like, hey, I want to move this 101 online because I feel like people can't absorb it enough. And I got so good at it, and people were coming who were beginners, and people who had seen every video and read the book and everything else, and me trying to stitch that together in one coherent, cogent day for people was a lot. Because people would be like, I've done every mobilization, watched every video ever done. And then people were like, what's your leg? What was the leg again? And I was like, okay, that's a lot. So we wanted to move it online because we realized there was so much more I wanted to add to that course. And so now what I'll say is, because we were rooted in person, because there's no substitute for being in one place, and the world has changed even in in-person course. I mean, CrossFit started putting up courses in line. Like, Perform Better would do its summits, but CrossFit was like one of the first groups. It was like, come for a day, learn this. We hosted the first CrossFit, Rob Wolf's class. We hosted the first, Power Athletes. We did the first one with Rob Orlando. Like, we hosted and test drove a lot of those, and that was really an amazing heady time. And all of a sudden, there's 10,000 courses. And that's just now a super glutted, right? I mean, it was Mike Bergner's course or nothing. And now all of a sudden, you're like, well, who do I want? I want to go with Chinese. I want to go with Ma.
You were in Charlotte. Glenn Pendley opened up the muscle driver, the equipment company. I mean, literally, there was an Olympic, and he had his little team of weightlifters, and he had a different Olympic weightlifting. All those athletes would just hit different CrossFit gyms. There was a different Olympic weightlifting cert every weekend for 4 years.
For 4 years. It was just like, I was like, okay, well, we can't go to the well as many times. So what we realized is that, where would you travel to? Okay, it's less and less, and it's so glutted, and people, that shyness is worn off. So we have to be able to deliver that information on the place. So we've been in this digital space for a minute, and then what we've realized is that we can actually do a better job of micro learning. So our live in-person course for 2 days is they're 10-hour days, and I usually start in the morning early and we train together, and if there's a pool, we do pool sessions afterwards, and we try to, I'm just like, I want to over-deliver. Like, you've spent all this money to come see me, I'm going to blow your fucking face off. Like, I don't even take lunch, let's go. Like, I don't need to hide, I'll stay here until you can't take it anymore, and that was our commitment. And then people would just have their, being rocked. So then what we ended up doing is realizing that, man, if we can give these little drips out and then sum up, then it was much more manageable. We had much better adherence, much better integration of the material. And then I think we'll bring people back in terms of camps and try to support. Because, again, there's no substitution for being in this. This magic is magic. And as long as you are engaged in a virtual program and you're not in a bunker somewhere in Antarctica, you need to go train with other people. And guess what? Jesus said that. Muhammad said that. Buddha said that. He's like, it's great you pray by yourself. That's really what Jesus said, but magic happens when there's more than one person together at the same time, right? And I was like, well, weird. It's almost like we've been talking about this for as long as there have been people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
masturbation's great, but have you tried sex?
Yeah, it's right. It really is. And I think, we're figuring all this out. Like, this experiment just seems like it's always been out. It has not been around here. For 20 years ago, none of this existed. And I think it's such an emergent and still nascent system that we're still figuring it out. And it's okay that we're going to kind of swing one way and then we'll swing the other way. I think the games have found a nice equilibrium. Instead of being all-encompassing, obsessing, I think we're all like, oh, the games are amazing for this group of people.
For the Ready State, how much of the business portfolio is the online, the certifying, the 20,000, and how much is when you go and the All Blacks want you? Is that a separate LLC? Is that all entwined in the Ready State? How does that work from an actual business? I know Juliet's probably that's her realm, right, as CEO. But.
We for sure. But our biggest piece is our online subscription service, and shout out to Juliet because we are one of the first businesses in fitness to have a subscription service. So everyone else model, welcome, you've been copying us, right? Even CrossFit. Dave gave me a lot of shit when we started charging. He's like, well, we're free and everything's free. And I was like, is it? The $25 and now it's free. And then they went back and started charging for it again because they realized it costs money to put this stuff out, right? So it was like the New York Times and then the Ready State. And we thought we'd lose everyone asking them to pay, but we could do more and more. So that's a huge chunk. And then you have to see everything else. It's like constellation. So I do consulting. We have product sponsors. We have products. We do courses. And suddenly, I'm a little, sometimes when I talk to people on the airplane, they're like, what do you do? I'm like a celebrity chef, but it's fitness, right? So I make pots and pans, and I teach people how to make pots and pans, and I have a cooking show, and then you can subscribe to my cooking channel, and right, we do all of these things. But the VMC, the virtual mobility coach, where you can have access. And I'm super stoked. One of the things that happens, I think, with a lot of legacy businesses, because we are the content king, like we are the creation king. We created this vertical, and then now that we have competitors, because it makes everyone better, and that's good. But they came in and were able to draft and walk in behind us a little bit. We broke a lot of ground, and the allegory is, we'd have coaches used to be with us and be like, you guys used to be on Yahoo? Like, what's Yahoo? And we're like, well, there's no Gmail when we opened, jerk, right? So it takes a minute to turn.
Yeah.
And if you can relate to this, if you're on MindBody, someone's like, come on in and leave MindBody. I'm like, oh, like I have to pour it over.
I just made them do that recently. They were not happy.
Yeah, I'm like, you're going to set up all my, all the recurrent billing and all So appreciate when there's a company who's been doing things for a long time, it takes a minute to pivot.
Yeah.
Right? It's just hard to change that ship.
It's turning a Titanic.
Yeah, for sure. And all the systems, and you can't possibly imagine how sophisticated it is. Our day-to-day meeting is 11 people. When we have that's the race day plus all of the SEO people and all the other but our core group is 11 full-time employees to run this little mom and pop stretching show, and we just launched a brand new app. Just soft launched it like 2 days ago.
Like native to iOS and Android.
And built it from the ground up, scratch. And I'm so stoked because that's another pivot. You need to make sure that like our desktop experience is pretty rad, but our wireframed out app wasn't very as good as we'd wanted it to be. And everyone has a phone, and that phone goes with everywhere. And if you can't deliver it, isn't rad in that phone, you're losing business. It's a big, big driver. So like all these other businesses, we get to go out, have the best content, the best crack, but it's taken us a second to just also be like, okay, let's turn the whole ship around and get caught up. It's much easier to start from scratch on those things.
Do you have what's the goal with the Ready Stay as a business? Do you guys have not a mission, but like a target? What are you aiming for? Is it a number? Is it what is that? Because
that's a good goal.
Because you guys coming in again, you have new information, but a lot of it is trying to get this current information that you have, maybe very similar to stuff you said 10 years ago, to new audiences. Yeah. And eventually you're kind of cooking the same thing. But for you guys, what do you see as the main mission and the goal of the business? Are you going to
I think
sell it?
Someday, here's what we've seen of late. I can talk about now. I've been working with Amazon for the last 2 years on a computer vision project, which launches in June. And Amazon has a new wearable called Halo, right? And track motion, sleep, the whole thing. It's good. And they approached me and said, hey, Kelly, we want to do some movement health, but we're not sure what we should look at and how to do it. And they had some really great people involved. One was a former athlete. And you can set up your phone. It'll watch you move, and they give you correctives, right? We don't do corrective exercises. We have mobilizations and movements and training, but corrective exercises is like a scaled-down version, right, of something. But here's a big company taking a crack at saying you should have hip flexion. You should be able to extend your hip. And what I didn't want them to do was to fuck it up. It's like, here we have biggest pockets ever taking a crack at telling the world you should have some dorsiflexion. You should be able to squat. That is a revolution and really a big opportunity. So I'm the face of the app. Wait till you see me all over the face of this app doing all the video, like Amazon Face Kelly stuff.
I knew him when.
Right, same bald guy. But what's interesting is tonal. We were talking about, we have a tonal on the wall they gave us. There's Tempo now out there. Look at the mirror. Yeah. All of these tech companies are suddenly realized they're content companies. And guess what our community has been doing for 15 years and who's the best in the world? No one is better at this than this original CrossFit. And they're, of course, look at Hybrid. They're great. I mean, I'm not trying to poop on anyone. What I'm trying to say is that there are people in our community who are really savvy at this. And what I suspect is going to happen is that some of these big companies like Nike, Amazon, Apple, they're going to be like, holy crap, look at what we have here. And they're going to go start buying and integrating, because they're shareholders or stakeholders in health. And as long as the Apple Watch is a product that the people are starting to pay attention to, do I think you need to look at your watch for push-up technique? That's maybe not a great use of that, right? And I had a lot of conversations with Amazon where they were like, some Israeli programmer was like, I want to use this to tell me how many push-ups I should do today. And I was like, you don't understand anything, right? Like, that's not how this works at all. But we can tell you if you can do a push-up or you have enough shoulder extension.
Are you a wearable tech? Like, if you mess around with tech wearables, is that all? That's
a watch. I wear an analog watch. That's my tech.
That's it. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. We've played with them all. I'm a huge fan of Whoop. Whoop changes behavior. It gets people. One of our staff members who's, we were like, we've been telling her for a long time she doesn't move enough. She exercises, trains, but she doesn't move enough. She got an Apple Watch, and all of a sudden she was like, holy crap. Now it's completely changed her behavior. Sleep has changed because of this. It gives us a chance to quantify. For example, I might not use it, but my wife is obsessed, so I get to kind of draft some of that stuff. But if you work with me and you have chronic pain or persistent pain and you don't track sleep, I won't work with you because I can't tell what's what. And I need to see if you're sleeping or not because all of our interventions
if you're not
don't
getting
work.
8 hours of sleep, I can't even start with
It's all horseshit. So that's how I think we can use this. I don't need my watch to tell me how to feel. A long time ago, I was trained to paddle the Molokai, the solo.
Malachi, the kid from Children of the Corn?
Same, but a little different. Tentacle end, big difference. You paddle from Molokai, the island of Molokai, to Oahu. You paddle across the
How
channel.
far is that?
It's 50 kilometers of open ocean paddling. And so I've done it a couple times, and I was trained up for it. Brian McKenzie's doing my programming, and it's a pretty good guy to help you with programming. And I was using and playing with early heart rate variability monitor called Omega Wave. And I would put this strap on and set up to my phone and have these leads that went to my head and my hand, and I'd be up and I have to lay quietly and monitor my breathing. And then my wife would be like, we have to get our kids out to school. And then it wouldn't pick up. And I was like, and we'd go this thing. And Brian would say, before you see the results, just check in with yourself and ask, how good do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And I was always exactly what the machine told me, right? I feel like shit. Oh, the machine says I feel like shit. I feel really good. The machine tells me I feel really good. So we just don't want to surrogate out. But again, I'm such a fan of anything that changes behavior, I'm in. Yeah. Because that's how we have to change some fundamental human behavior. So do I use these wearables? No, but everyone has a phone. That's a wearable because it's in your pocket all the time. And it tracks your steps and can help you move and remind you to sleep and drink some water. Ooh, I'm starting to be in there, right? And especially looking at these issues of social justice right now, because we have to ask who has access to all of this. Like, we've gotten really sophisticated about eating and training, but we're not helping 99% of the population with that.
So let's go from the tech side, the advanced side, to the most analog side, the book. I want to talk about, at that stage you wrote Supple Leopard. Walk me through this. Just actually, I want actual tactics on this. You decide you're going to write a book. Do you call a publishing company? Do you call a book writing consultant?
So it's such a good one. We don't call. I never call anyone. I've never knocked on a door or called anyone. People knock on our doors. People are like, Juliet's in a bunch of masterminds, and people say, well, like, hey, how do you get on podcasts? And she's like, I don't know. People just call us. I want to be on your podcast. I'm like, it's not how it works. It's just not how it works. Your friends will find you. Do something really interesting. I hate to say that. It sounds so trite. Be fucking awesome. Do something interesting, and there'll be plenty of times to talk about it. Really, I swear to God, that's it, right? Or start it yourself and talk to people, really. So Rob Wolf wrote a book,
Paleo Solution.
Paleo Solution, and I can't tell you how ahead of the time that was because no one had a book. And it was the first time, and he made the New York Times bestselling list. I remember talking to Rob on the phone. I was at an airport going to teach somewhere, and he just made the New York Times bestseller. And I was like, one of my friends wrote a book that made the New York Times? Like, that was like one of my friends ran a 2-minute mile and did a 30-second Fran. Like, that was what that was. Like, I was shocked. And then his publisher reached out, Victory Belt, and they were like, hey, we'd like you to write a book about what you're doing. I'd already been teaching a ton, and I already had a framework for this because I was teaching people. So Supple Leopard is the course. That's what it is, plus a little bit more. But it was the course. And so I had this whole framework for how I was trying to help people understand complex movement. And Juliet and I were like, totally, we'll sign it. So we signed this deal. No one we knew we didn't get the best deal. We weren't very, but it was also, who's going to buy a $60 book about squatting? Like, it's not really, not given. That wasn't a success, right? There's no sexy women in there. And for like, I think for 6 months, we kind of sat down and kind of toyed with it, or 3 months, and I was like, man, Juliet, we don't even own a camera. How do we take photos and lay this out? So Glenn Cordoza was my co-writer on that book, and Glenn worked for the company, and he had written and ghostwritten and written and written a ton of martial arts books for like Kung Le and like some serious people. And Glenn was at a time in his life where he had a girlfriend but did not have a baby, nothing, and he came and lived at my house, and he became a brother, and the two of us sat down, and I beautiful mind this, and I would write and he would write, and he'd transcribe, and we would edit, and the three of us just did that with Juliet.
How long did that process take?
Year and a half. It was burly. And again, we didn't have an advance. We didn't do that. Like, there's no, like, I was like, this needs to be done. There's the megalomania, the maniac. And then we had the most cheerful, enthusiastic, stoked community ever called CrossFit, who was like, we have your back because you have our back. And they showed up for us. They pre-ordered. And that book changed my life. You know, and we put a second edition out. The thing came out in 2013, so we're creeping up on a 10-year anniversary of that book. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
We're working on a 10-year anniversary book edition of it. It sold 600,000 copies. That's the conservative estimate, which is dumb. It's just ridiculous. And it has opened 1 million doors, you know, because people find it and it's ideas, and there's nothing in there that's wrong. There's some things that are dated that just aren't as effective as what we understand now because we've been practicing.
Sure.
You know, like here's a critique of CrossFit. Greg's program, the original level 1, was amazing 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But they codified it because to get it accredited, they had to set it in stone, which means it didn't have a chance. And I understand their reticence about getting it reaccredited would also make me super queasy because that was like a full-time job for Nicole and a whole staff for a long time. But that thing is, I just took my level 1 again. Guess what? There's no hip extension in the 9 essential movements. There's not a single hip extension movement. There's no shoulder extension there. You think that's important? If you do CrossFit, of course you're going to lunge and run and extend your hip, right? I'm not talking about like standing from a squat. I'm talking about taking your hip with your knees behind your butt, right? Hip extension. So there are some holes in the level 1, but there were no holes 15 years ago when we were starting that, or 16 or 17 years ago.
It was the thing.
So let's just, you know, it's the same thing. Like the FMS is a great functional movement screen. Came out in 1996. Can I see your cell phone that you're still using from 1996? Right? So I'm like, what car are you driving from 1996? No one has that tech, so quit banging on that. In 96, that was fucking hot, right? And that blew people's minds. And 16 years ago, the level 1 was a revolution.
It absolutely was.
And I just went through it. They did an amazing job of creating a digital content on the internet. I was on with an amazing coach from South America who did this. You know, he was in Colombia and taught remotely in Colombia, and he was enthusiastic and amazing. And I was like, dude, it's the same material that I had when I taught this with Dave and Greg and Nicole 1 million years ago. So there's time for that to evolve. And I think my critique is all fitness and all strength and conditioning needs to evolve. It doesn't have to mean that it has to become, we don't need to stop squatting because there's some new hip thrust machine, but how we teach about it can evolve. So that's what we've been trying to do, is continue to evolve our practice because we're users.
That was a moment for me. I was in college around 2006, and I was doing an internship with the CSCS. I would go to a Velocity Sports Performance in Nashville, Tennessee, and I would go and they would just give me grunt work, and I'd work with little athletes, kids mainly, for 40 hours a week unpaid.
Wow.
But
you learned so much.
Yeah. I mean, well, I remember them giving me the book. I mean, that was part of the thing. You come and do this, and we'll pay for your CSCS. I'm like, that's dope. I was at graduate school on Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah. How's this Fick equation helping my children?
Dude, that book was so dated because they gave me 2 copies. They're like, we have an older one. I don't know, it was edition 8. They gave me edition 9, whatever was the newest one. The exact same fucking thing. And I remember like putting down my level 1 that I printed inside of the school, the library in college. I took my level 1 in 2006, I think, or something like that.
You had your mind blown.
And it was just like this. And again, it was only this thick, but this fucking book that technically I would have had to pay $400 for was this thick. And I was just could not be blown away that everything was so outdated. There's not even an ounce in that CSCS book to even update an ounce of it. And that's when I think I really scholastically fell in love with what CrossFit had put together.
I read the first journals that Greg put out were PDFs that would come out once a month. PDF. And I would live and die by those. And I think I got them on the 7th journal. And even then, I remember being at Mike Bergner's Olympic lifting seminar where I was volunteering. I think I told you I'd fly down, and coach would let me be assistant, which meant I got to shut the fuck up, carry weights, get coffee, and listen. It was amazing.
Sleep on someone's couch.
Dude, it didn't matter. But Greg showed up, and one of the things that used to be is in order to be an affiliate, you had to have a link to the CrossFit Journal. It was part of your thing.
Yeah, on your website.
You had to show it so you can link it. Because it was $25 a month to me, which was a lot of money back then for me when I had no money. But those things were the most valuable things I read. I read them cover to cover. I memorized them. I printed them out. I had them. And then I remember Greg saying, that was $1 million property. So 1 million years ago in 2007, he was making $1 million a year off of that. And I remember being like, holy crap, this guy has figured something out about scale. And that's how ahead he was then. And now, if you got a PDF in the mail, you'd be like, seriously, a PDF?
Yeah.
It's just old tech.
It's old tech. Let's talk about Greg for a second. Your interactions with him, obviously. I don't want to speak for you. I'll let you go. When the things came out in the summer, with everything, the PR nightmare of 2020, what was your immediate reaction? Someone you were pretty close to the ecosystem in the Sun. What was were you surprised? Were you not surprised? Was this?
So you always have to understand when you're hearing someone, I'm not equivocating here or dodging. People grow up and have known each other for 20 years. And so like tell me about what's going on with your family right now. Okay, we need to go back to Thanksgiving 89, right? When Uncle Ted got drunk. That's where we need to be. And what I'll say is I had great disappointment, hugely disappointed. Look, when you're the only game in town and the hottest game in town, you can do a lot. And you can really crush people consciously and unconsciously. If you got excommunicated, which many of us did, it was a wasteland. And, one of the things that I knew was that I could be successful without the CrossFit ecosystem pressure. Right? I didn't need that. I knew that I had enough to eat. When we took our course out, I didn't go back into CrossFit for a year. I did not teach in a CrossFit gym for a year. I taught other places because I saw people who were like, CrossFit sucks, and then they break up with CrossFit, and then they go right back into CrossFit gyms. And I was like, that's too bad. And I was a CrossFitter. I still owned a CrossFit gym. So when all that happened, I'd say it was just lost opportunity, but we shouldn't be surprised. That was a normal expression of that system. I think there was a lot of behaviors there that were written off because of the good of that we were doing, and I think we've seen that before with Harvey Weinstein, and we've seen that before with Nexium, and we've seen that before with. I think you can choose a lot. There are a lot of things about CrossFit that makes it a religion, and it makes it like a cult. And I'm not trying to say we're a part of a cult. Don't take umbrage to this. What I'm saying is that we have fanatical people who. This company changed my life. All my friends, we're sitting here because of CrossFit, right? This whole gym, the whole thing. So what I think what we saw was, wow, my gym is closed. My legacy business of 15 years is closed because of COVID, and now I'm putting out fires, having to manage. I've already had to have conversations about why we're handing out Glocks after school shootings at the CrossFit Games. Why is Dave Castro wearing a gun at the ranch during a running competition? Why are there statements about HIV and AIDS on the site? Why is there a climate denial paper on the site? There was plenty of things where we were like, hey, look, the politics are the side, and it's a privately owned company, and you can walk away. But what we did was a lot of us engaged in a lot of gymnastics because the thing is so good, right? And the community is so good, and the methodology is so good, and the positivity out of that. But you can't escape that. And I was on the first call that Greg did with all the affiliates, and where they went around and called everyone and talked about it, and we're talking
about the tweet.
Mm-hmm. No, not the tweet. I'm talking about some of the other things he said.
Okay.
Right, but what I want to remind everyone was that this is Greg's privately owned company. He can say whatever he wants and do whatever he wants because it was his company. It's okay. I can run my company the way I want to. And so I really respect that. And what I chose to do is not comment on it, right? Because I was like, I'm going to take what the good. But all of a sudden, you know, when cancel culture, what's the right thing to do, you know, it made my life very, very difficult. And what I would say is, wow, how much of this behavior have we just undone in our goodwill that we're trying to do? You know, recently we've even heard Savan say it. We've heard Craig Howard say it. You know, man, we probably could have done better in America if we were a little bit more insulin sensitive, not so obese. And they're like, look, we already had the solution. We've had it for, why aren't you paying attention to it? I'm like, well, we're kind of a lily white organization. We haven't done a great job with diversity and inclusion. Look at the thing that took Greg down. Look at how we've turned off. I mean, I was like, you know, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot.
If you truly have the solution to the most vexing problem in the world, the delivery method you have is not as widely adopted for many reasons.
You know, this thing was so powerfully true that, and Greg was such a talent, complicated person. We'll just leave it that's complicated. But he knew that if you let communities work in their own ways, then, and there were problems with that. It would be the CrossFit down the street, gutting this CrossFit, right? You'd be like, screw you, I'm going to start my own gym, and it's next door, right? I'm taking all my people. And then that, you know, there were problems with that. And is ownership of an area the best way? I think they chose a solution to let CrossFit go wild, and suddenly there was a glut, and like there was a CrossFit everywhere. How many CrossFits were in that greater metropolitan Denver area at one point? Like, you remember that?
Yeah.
That stat?
Yeah.
It was insane, especially in light industrial warehouses. So I think we were protected a little bit in San Francisco because the rents were so insane. But simultaneously, the smartness, you know, the Chinese have a saying, the emperor is far from the field. And I think the great thing is that CrossFit HQ was a separate thing from what it meant to be. But the problem was, as long as those faces and associations were always there, we always had to explain that away. And that was a pain in the ass as a business owner. Guess what? That's a choice. I could have left CrossFit any time. So what I chose not to do is throw a tantrum. I could have left. And that's what we did when our business relationship became untenable with our courses. We just took our courses out. And you know what we said? Thank you very much. And you know what I didn't do? Throw a big public hissy fit. And I didn't need to step on anyone or shout or, you know, and there was, I think it was real concern that I would just raise hell, and that they didn't necessarily badmouth me publicly. I didn't badmouth them publicly. And then we kind of had a neutral truce zone. You know, I'm friends with Dave still. Like, we are fine. And again, as a big boy, big girl, anyone who disagreed with the company could have left any time.
I think in the affiliate world, go ahead.
And I'll just say there's some ugly ass, shitty behavior where we expect better. That's what I'll say, right? So there's a whole lot of things that are really bad, and yet, you know, how do you counteract with the good? Watch any of the documentaries that Ed Burns does, and where we start telling the whole story, and what you realize is that it's complicated, it's complex. Right there, it's nuanced, and I think that's the problem. Is we've lost this nuance. So, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. The CrossFit affiliate scene, I was in it from 2011, and then we did not renew the affiliate. I believe it was in 2018, something like that, 19 maybe. The affiliates always wanted more business, some kind of guidance, and the thing that would drive me mad, and again, they just maybe not have that acumen. In the United States, a license model cannot have a continued business relationship with its licensees. The United States has the most strict franchise laws in the country. If this was the UK, it's a completely different scenario, but it's not.
That's right.
And I would hear people complain like, well, for my $3,000, I'm like, that's what a license is. Calvin Klein is a license. Those pair of pants you have, Calvin didn't fucking make those. Some guy who pays for a Calvin Klein license made those in Taiwan, and now you are wearing them. And but I always was like, why doesn't CrossFit literally and I read literally, I can tell you how many times the Black Box, Rob Wolf did an amazing blog post on what happened at the Black Box and that shit show that happened back in the day.
Oh, yeah, I did not go to that on purpose.
That's an insane
because I knew
thing.
It was going to be a shit show.
But in there, he documents where Greg and Dave stood up and said, well, we can't do all the things you want because just license and franchisee thing. However, there was a point in where you and me kind of in our journeys, I loved CrossFit. And I do look at everything as constantly varied functional movements. Everything that exists in a boutique fitness world has to tip their hat and bend the knee to
100
constantly
we know
varied
the
functional movements.
TRX kids, and I'm like, oh, it looks a lot like CrossFit.
Correct. Where I think the train came off the tracks, where my disassociation with it is when the bipolarization of CrossFit, the fitness program that could be the solution to the most vexing problem, and just get fit, and then the sport. And then it went from like, let's say at the time, maybe 10,000, 12,000 little independent, awesome little spots around the world making people fitter. And then inside of each one of them, there was also this other goal that maybe some members, nobody ever walked into CrossFit San Francisco, well, maybe CrossFit San Francisco, but said, I want to know how to snatch an overhead squat. It's like, I heard this thing makes me look better naked and it's fun. My friends tell me about it. But then 6 months later, someone's crying because an Asian girl beat them in 13.1 on the fucking leaderboard.
Or they went to another gym and did it secretly.
Where did that go wrong? And do you believe it's due to the CrossFit the sport versus CrossFit? Should it have been called something? Should the sport have been called something else to disassociate?
It's so easy to go
MMA
back.
and UFC.
So easy to go back in time and be like, we should have done that, right? I was the head judge of the first CrossFit Games. And what I'll tell you is I remember distinctly when there was going to be a CrossFit competition, I was like, oh, this has got ruined for me. Because I'd come out of professional sports. And CrossFit was the greatest agnostic way to train for something else. So suddenly when it was a sport, which was great for everyone, we've all benefited from CrossFit as a sport. But I remember thinking, okay, now it's recursive. Now I have to do more pull-ups so I can do more pull-ups so I can do more pull-ups. And I was like, ugh. So I remember this clearly. There's a PDF about the ranch and what we're doing. And I remember being like, oh, I don't know if I feel about this, because this is the one thing that's and put training back into joy for me, right? And competing. But simultaneously, what we've got out of it is better movement quality, better training systems, better, like we've basically used this last 15 years of generation, or however long the game's been going around, as a a laboratory to crush bodies and figure out what's possible. The ends
justify the means, Truman kind of scenario.
A long time ago, the CrossFit Games should have been its own LLC, independent. But guess what? I don't run that business. And if you have a critique with CrossFit, I'm like, remember that time where you built an international global phenomenon and couldn't hire enough people? How did that go for you?
Runaway trains run away from
Yeah. So that's exactly right. It was a runaway train, and it was bananas. It was chaos. And imagine the paranoia, because, I think we were talking about, where I said something like I was a young teenager in someone else's house.
Yeah.
Not until you've been ripped off 100,000 times are people trying to take a swing at you or take a cheap shot at you. Suddenly that's your filter. So for lack of a better word, if you are a police officer in a gnarly part of town and you only see people ODing and family abuse, and like, you have a really polarized view of the world. Again, I'm not talking about any police actions right now. I'm just saying that it's easy if you're a paramedic to only see the worst people and think of the worst of people. So CrossFit suddenly goes through a filter where everyone's stealing from CrossFit. Everyone's doing a CrossFit-like thing and not showing, so for example, when I'm on Joe Rogan, we were at a time in CrossFit did not want to have anything to do with my book. They didn't want to promote it. They really felt like, I asked Greg to actually, people don't know this, I asked Greg to write the intro, the foreword, and he didn't want to do it. So I sent a box of books. I was like, hey, I really tried to be transparent, and then it wasn't enough. And so when I went to Joe Rogan, I did not mention CrossFit. You know why? Because they didn't ask me, they didn't want me to. I was a problem for them. How do we do that, right? And then afterwards, they're like, you didn't mention CrossFit. I was like, Jesus Christ, like, you have to choose if I'm going to be one of your champions and vocal forces for good, or I'm not going to mention you. And now imagine me magnified times 100,000 other people who are starting little gyms, and now you're trying to defend the brand in Australia and New Zealand and knockoffs and so and so fit. So I can see how it got chaotic. Suddenly, like, there were a lot of CrossFit lawyers running around for a second. Now we're like, okay, it's like everything's come down a little bit. So, in retrospect, again, the games was amazing. We have a whole generation of young athletes who actually can make a living or some kind of living. The competition is great, but man, did it fuck up gym culture. Let me just say that again. So bad. People crying, and this team, and people are so special because they're going to regionals, and it created this just
It was a high school. It became a sorority, a high school.
So fucking gross. I'm swearing on purpose because it just pissed me off, and it was so terrible. I mean, it just made bad things in our gym. And, and Juliet, our team took 10th one year in the CrossFit Games. I mean, like, we were in. We thought it was fun, and then it wasn't fun all of a sudden. And we realized that, like, in order to do that and feed that beast, it was just a separate thing. So
was it so big at CrossFit San Francisco? It wasn't worth cutting out, like looking at it as a cancer and cutting it out? It's just like
we did. We ended up really just de-emphasizing and walking further and further away from that because we did try to do things like, oh, this is our competitive team, and then they were so entitled. And if you're listening to this and you were a member of my gym back then and a bad behavior, shame on you. You were awful in my gym, and I had to put out 1,000 fires because of it, and it's my fault because I let it exist. Instead of saying, no, we're just not into that, that's a different sport. But again, there's a lot of pressure. We have this incredible, insurance system through CrossFit, right? The CrossFit RG, Risk Retention Group. And in order to found that, we were all publicly pressured to give $1,000 that we'd never get back. And at the time, that was a lot of money. And there was a list of people who had paid and who hadn't paid, and it was publicly made. And if you were on the list, you were basically a pariah. And that was, they were pressured to fund the thing. And you either made $1,000 donation to CrossFit or you didn't. And simultaneously balance that with the fact that my affiliate fees haven't gone up in 16 years. They're still $500, right? So the most loyal company that will tolerate a whole bunch of shitty behavior before they excommunicate you. Tony Budding, I said this to Tony Budding once, CrossFit will do nothing for you. This is back in the day, but they'll do everything for you. They'll give you a roadmap and opportunity. Greg pulled Rob aside a long time ago. He's like, stick with me, kid, I'll make you a millionaire, And I think Greg really had a vision for fitness and revolution. But then, I'm sorry, where did he get his MBA? Where did Dave and Nicole get their MBA and physical training? They didn't. We learned on the ground. I mean, how many gyms had I owned before I owned that? None. How many big businesses had I run with 500 members? None. So some of this is easy to say now because we're in just a different landscape entirely.
So I look at CrossFit very much like pizza. It's very synonymous now. There's pizza, there's CrossFit, but there's New York style, there's Chicago deep dish, there's whatever, thin crust, there's cauliflower, whatever. How are your thoughts? I mean, it's something that I did, and I think it's the evolution of a brand that is underground, becomes mainstream, and then becomes agnostic for almost pretty much everything. Like, I do this thing when I go in and work with a gym. I grab a bumper plates, I put a bar, I put a plyo box and a rower, and I'm like, what's that a picture of? And they'll all say, I'm like, no, that's CrossFit. You show it to anyone, even an ignorant fitness person. And like, I think, I don't know, maybe that CrossFit
That's
thing.
Kleenex.
Yeah, exactly. Kleenex and tissues, you got it. What are your thoughts on the gym owners now that were a part of the tribe, they learned, and they're going in different directions, and they are cutting out their own sliver? Because the only thing that's the only thing that's, I believe, a disadvantage from them, they have an amazing name. Name me some other gym that when you walk in the Dick's, you see it on shoes and shorts, right? There's amazing fucking advantages to being a goddamn CrossFit affiliate. But if you truly have a unique belief in fitness, or you want to take a different edge on something, and you would put CrossFitters in there and show them your new fitness thing and say, hey, this is my new fitness thing, but I'm a CrossFit. They'd be like, oh, that's not CrossFit. So now you have almost an obligation to kind of carve that out. Have you worked or talked with any gym owners like, I'm de-affiliating, or I'm not de-affiliating, but I'm doing it way different. Like, I'm not doing these movements, that thing, this equipment, that. And CrossFitters are quitting left and right because it's quote unquote not CrossFit.
I haven't seen people banding left and right. I think what's notable and that you correctly highlight is, early on, people built their entire business name and their entire sort of security around something they didn't own. You just license the name. We've been called Training House Incorporated from day one. So the name of our business is Training House. In fact, the Vikings, the football team, have a thing that they tried to name Training House Inc., but we owned it.
You could sum a C and D.
Yeah. That's right. So they it's like training something or other house or something.
House, yeah.
Right, because they really tried to buy Training House, and they were like, oh, shit, this little gym owns Training House Inc., right? And so early on, we were like, look, we can never be in a position where CrossFit can turn our whole livelihood off, and so we needed something else. And that was an early thing. I think Rob Wolf and Greg.
NorCal's trying to get, yeah.
NorCal. We always were like, hey, there's two things. I think early on there was one of the things that's so amazing is when I travel, I know there's a gym everywhere, and there's a culture everywhere, and there's people who understand me, who understand the shoes I'm wearing things I train. When I went to Singapore, right, but it's on my brain because I have a ton of good friends there, and it's the last place I taught publicly before the pandemic. I got taken to every cool restaurant and trained with everyone and introduced, and I had a family that I did not have to explain myself to at all. We all had a common universal language called CrossFit, right? So balance that with the fact that my gym has been around for a while. I'm pretty good, world-class coaching, da-da-da. There's other things like that exist in San Francisco, but you open your gym. There was Pacheco Valley, who lived really close by, and they were like, we're the Bay Area's most elite CrossFit. And I was like, who are you? What have you done? They've gone out of business. She was a photographer. He was a nurse, something like that. And I was like, that's super cool. But now, how do I differentiate myself? So if you have WOD in the last part of your name, how do you differentiate yourself? Yeah. So it's a naming problem, and it's the same naming problem that Netflix had. It's the same naming problem that everyone else had. Like, one of our friends, Danny Ching, is an incredible world-class paddler, and he couldn't get a name for his paddleboard company. Every time he put something in, it'd say 404, not found, 404, so he called it 404, right? So you have to understand that early on, having CrossFit in your name was an advantage, but I think you could still be a CrossFit as an associate. And I think you have to now differentiate. We always, at our gym, until we closed down, of course, we were a CrossFit gym. We CrossFitted. Our main classes were CrossFitting. That's what you came to. And then I had a skilled conditioning class, which was CrossFit-based, but skilled conditioning, no barbells. And then over here, we had our Olympic lifting program. And then we had right? So I think in that gym, you can start to say, hey, there's some other things we want to do. But every member of our staff could CrossFit, taught CrossFit, could CrossFit, could teach snatching. Those were our core values, because that's the value that we saw originally as the powerful thing that wasn't the gym. So it's a little disingenuous to be like, oh, I don't need CrossFit anymore. But also, how do you differentiate yourself from this person down the street who sucks or is new or doesn't suck? They're just new and they don't have your facility or your thing. So that's tricky. Yeah. Right.
I'm curious your take on this. So what you described there, we had CrossFit, then we had these other things. That was, and it was right around 2000, maybe 9, 10, that kind of model really started to evolve in the CrossFit affiliate world, having some of these additional classes, these little subsets. And I used to tell people, listen, no, don't be a Swiss Army knife yet. Like the great gyms, like you were a great CrossFit gym. You were a great knife. What do knives do? They fucking stab shit. You could stab shit all day. You were sharp as fuck. And then you added the pliers, and then you added this thing, but you had to get that one thing down first, where if you never added anything else, you'd still be profitable, you'd still be able to pay the bills, you'd have happy clients and employees that had careers now. Get that down first, and then add all these little nuances.
Yeah, any gym owner can do this. People say, I heard from people, I'm like, who? How many? Because I'm like, just was one person is like, I wish we had this
loud
machine.
Minority.
Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that means. That means one person told a coach one time, right? What I will say, that we were one of the first gyms to do, this sounds crazy, personal training. We
fucking nuts, Kelly. What the fuck are you talking about?
There's only CrossFit classes, and I was like, and then there's ways for coaches to make real livings and not make $37,000 a year.
And a better way to probably onboard people in all reality.
Sure. And, the onboard program, this on-ramp program,
Nikki Violetti and Rob both created that.
Amen. Their piece, and they were, the first time they were excommunicated from CrossFit, they were in my kitchen. And I've known those guys forever.
She's my hero, by the way. I used to read her blog. She had the first CrossFit business blog to ever hit the scene.
I know.
Go in there. Anyone listening, go to Google. I tell people this all the time. Go to Google, put in Nikki Violetti, CrossFit business. It's still there. The entire original on-ramp.
They do so many things. They've done so much for our community and so many things. They do so many things well. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches how talented those two are. We don't get to see them very often. They moved to
Would you do an intro with me with Nikki? Will you do an introduction for me for Nikki? She's like one of my absolute favorites.
Oh, and she's such a savage. And you have to understand when you talk to this old guard, the amount of, I'm trying not to filter myself, but I'm trying to give you context a little bit, right? It's tricky. But those two, like we drafted off them so hard. Greg Everett built our first website.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we were. So, because we didn't know how to do it. And Greg was a developer. He wasn't even Olympic lifting. He was skinny. He was skinny biker Greg, right?
Before Catalyst Athletics.
He didn't even know Amy and I yet, right? Okay. So he was up there with Rob. So I don't remember what we're talking about.
No, we're just talking about adding the Swiss Army knife.
What I would say is the personal training was still CrossFit based.
Sure.
It's still CrossFit based. We're a CrossFit gym. That's what we're doing. That's what people expect. And there are some, we would tinker and add in flavor and new toys, but at the core, what we're doing is couplets and triplets because this methodology works, and it's exercise ADD for people, and it's community. And if you watch NXIVM, the cult about NXIVM, right? Watch Wild Wild Country, another cult movie, and you'll see that these groups all have this shared dissociative experience, and that's our workout. Our workout is so hard, it changes your consciousness because you think you're going to die or you have to pay attention, and then we share through this experience, and that is the heart of soul of what people need and belong to. Football exists in America today because it's the only time that men were ever on a team their whole lives. There's a place for someone. Everyone can CrossFit. Everyone can CrossFit. 500-pound people can CrossFit. Beginners can CrossFit. I ran my skill conditioning class. Just CrossFit without barbells. Right? There's the only class in our whole gym ecosystem you could come in right off the street, right into my class. And I made it a priority that every person in the class could do a pull-up. That was just like one of my values. I told them, like, oh, you're new here? You're going to be doing pull-ups every day when we see you. And then every single fucking person had a pull-up. And that's because that's a CrossFit value, that you can do a pull-up. Right?
And also, if you're just from a business perspective, it's the one thing we talk to people about. Like, we have a woman come in here and be like, are you married yet? She'll get married. I'm like, that was probably the best day of your life. Do you have a kid? Like, okay, that's the best of your life. The next one's going to be when you get your first pull-up. Because universally, if we walked around with a microphone, we did 1,000 people, ma'am, would you like to deadlift 500 pounds, 400 pounds?
I don't care.
No. Would you like to run an ultra marathon, a regular marathon? No. Would you like to be able to do a pull-up? Fuck yes. 9 out of 10 people, I would put my entire life on it.
And those early values, we worked. There was an early CrossFit challenge to get 30 pull-ups, and there was an early CrossFit challenge to get 40 pull-ups, and there was one that was 50 pull-ups. Long before Chris Spiel did 100 pull-ups. I remember the first time I did 40 pull-ups in a row, and I was like, I am a god. I'm sure my bar didn't go over and or whatever. But some of it was unwritten. People don't realize that there used to be a web page on the CrossFit side that if you had a muscle up, you actually made this list of people who could do a muscle up. There were not that many people on the list. Then it went to 2 pages, and we were like, what?
Unless you're an 8-year-old in gymnastics, you're like, what do you mean, Dad? That's just how I get on the rings. That's just what I do.
Unless you realize that now you do synchronized muscle-ups, and you do 100 in a row. Right? So, I don't think, in this context of business, evolution, and fitness, this, it wasn't yet. It was yesterday that you couldn't buy a kettlebell in San Francisco. It was yesterday that there was no Rogue. It was yesterday that there wasn't 7 options for how you manage your members and communicate with your members. It's just very different. There was no sugar WOD.
It's very young.
It was just, we were inventing it, making our equipment, figuring it out, and then in that there's a lot of ego and personality, and now people are like, okay, it's a little bit more an established business. It's like BMX racing.
You made your first squat racks. These fuckers, look at this now. Like, if I would have shown this to you, if I just popped up in my DeLorean after going 85 with Doc Brown, I was like, hey, check, Kelly, this is what you got. All right, see you, buddy. You'd be like, there's no way, that's not real.
Bumper plates, are those from those from Poland?
Is that Optimus Prime? What is that thing? Like,
how many barbells do you have?
I know, it's insane, the evolution.
So, in that, now you have to have gone through all of that to get to here. The question is, what do we want to do now? That's really what, especially when some of the CrossFit gyms are going away, thank goodness, right? Because we just didn't need.
It was bloated.
And it's the same thing we're seeing where people who are probably running CrossFit gyms who didn't need to use it as a time to pivot. As many as they failed, like ours failed, there was ones that just needed to pivot, right? People were just like, I've been doing this a long time. We can shut the doors. And that's any normal business cycle, right? That's 100% any field, anything. So we're a pretty sophisticated lot now. There's a lot going on in terms of sophistication, the average person and what the language they speak. In 96, I'm like, well, how much did you overhead squat in 96? And people were like, I didn't overhead squat. And I was like, that's why it was a good test in 96. But now everyone overhead squats.
Yeah. I see CrossFit as this amazing initial layer of strength and conditioning, exercise phys that landed on a bunch of individuals that were dental assistants, and they worked at Bank of America, and then they found this thing, and they took a level 1. Yeah. And now what I'm hoping is that as those that still survive 2020 are dive deeper. Like, I do believe there are things missing out of the recipe, right? I do, like, I love an emphasis on tempo and isometric and unilateral. And traditionally, if we go back to when we started this thing, it was heavy, it was fast, and then it was heavy fast, and then it was a mix.
The bar was low enough that it didn't matter. That's what I'll say. We were all limited by being unskilled and not very fit and not very strong.
And now where we are now, do you, like, if you got to rewrite the level 1 now, or the emphasis on the fitness movements and the principles that we teach, if Kelly Starrett got to write it, would there be anything different that you would do with the level 1 manual that you were?
Oh yeah, for sure. There would be, you'd see that there would be normal expressions of every position. Like I said, there's no shoulder extension. There's no push-up. There's no dip. There's no bench, right? There's no burpee. There's none of that doesn't exist. Running, you can't take the arm into extension anywhere in the level 1. So is that not important? It's not an essential movement. But as soon as you go into a CrossFit class, it's there, right? Would we explain tempo and isometrics? Yeah, that's for sure we would. Would the sumo high pull be there? I understand what Greg was trying to do. He needed an internal rotation of the shoulder. So suddenly we have a hang archetype, right? But no one does that movement. It's a dumb movement. Not because you're going to get hurt, because no one does it. And the one time they put it in the games, it was a disaster because it didn't move a large load a long distance quickly. It actually did not meet the means. And yet got people pulling sumo, right? Got people get into a hang shape. Everyone could do it. I used to think, I was like, medicine balls are so dumb. And then I'm like, ooh, it's the easiest way to challenge someone's squat position, and we can get everyone moving quickly, opening, closing the hip, close chain, open chain. Medicine balls fucking awesome. We need more medicine balls. And so some of it, I think, you have to understand the time, what are the tools available. Greg wrote a article about training a lot of people with just dumbbells, 30s and 50s, a long time ago. And you can get a lot done with a pair of dumbbells. I think there's so much equipment and so much nuance. I think now, there's a lot of opportunity in CrossFit for it to leap ahead and tap into 15 years of decentralized experimentation. There are look what Matt Fraser's doing. Look at the programming of Annie. Look at the programming of Yami Tikkanen or any superstars, Mayhem. That is deep, incredible knowledge, and what you'll see is that there's a huge missing overlap between what the best in the world are doing and how they're doing it and how they're on-ramping people and what we're teaching as our entree to the thing. So someone has a problem. If I lay over Shane's programming, everyone else, you're going to be like, oh, I see, it's all the same. Ben Bergeron's a genius, right? It all matches up. But then just taking the level 1 and lay over on top of that, how does it match? It doesn't match very well. So you're seeing that the system has outrun its base. It doesn't make the base wrong. It's just time to change. That's all. And that's a great opportunity. And again, there's so much going on, and it's not my business, not my circus, not my monkeys. But I should not have to, and I'll say this publicly 1,000,000 times, every 5 years I should not have to take that course again. That is offensive. I did not become a less capable CrossFit coach by owning a CrossFit gym for 16 years that I need to go learn and have someone critique my overhead squat with a PVC pipe. That's horseshit, waste of time. Should I pay my money every year? No problem. I want to maintain my credential and licensing. Here's my $100. Here's my $200. No problem. I want to own my gym? No problem. Take that course again? That's a bummer. Super bummer.
What do you see equipment-wise? What is the name of that amazing flywheel fucking thing you have?
Oh, Kratos?
Yeah,
right there.
that guy right there?
Kabuki.
So I look at that, and we already messed around with the tonal, diagonal plane movements, non-existent for the most part outside of CrossFit. There's some things, right? As you see the gym today, I have a big belief that things are going to consolidate and get more streamlined and tighter and smaller and more compact and things like that. That's just my random belief. What tools would you love to see the Rogues of the world, the Precors of the world make more commercially available for the average micro gym or something like that? Things that you're messing with now that you didn't when you were deep into sauce.
Well, ultimately we're looking at which tools I want to reach for, right? And I'll run everything through this filter. How many athletes am I dealing with? 3, 5? That's a very different thing than I've got 30 kids coming in for their high school PE. We ran high school PE for a local high school. Right? Can you imagine that your high school PE is coming to my gym 3 to 5 times a week? Can you imagine that? I'm like,
your insurance premium. Everyone just testing your liability insurance.
I was like, screw you, little kids. You got world class coaching for PE. That's not fair. What I'll say is, I ran everything through the filter. Does this scale across cohorts? Do I Tendo unit? It would be great to measure power. I need 40 of them. I'm out. Right?
Sure.
So suddenly, what we saw was that, man, with this small pieces of equipment, we had so much access. Now, one of the things that's happened in the gym, which really sort of gets under my skin a little bit, is we don't need to train every ray, every vector, and every exposure in the gym. That was what sport was supposed to do, and we forgot what we were training for. And in fact, in fitness, 100 words or less, it's like, go learn to play a new sport. When's the last time you learned a new sport? When's the last time you played new sports? How many sports did you do this week? And the answer is very few. You did CrossFit. And there's a time when you're in business, when you have a newborn baby, you get it to the gym, there's no time for sport. There's like, I'm just keeping myself alive. But the second you can go spend some of those credits, you need to go spend your fitness credits. Go test yourself. Go do a sport. So yes, there's not a lot of transverse movement in the gym, but we do have medicine balls, so we can throw medicine balls, right? So we're just not throwing medicine balls. How do we scale that? How do we advance it? You know, do I need to get everyone cutting laterally? One of the things at our old gym outdoor, we did so many drags on the sleds in so many different ways, crossovers. So I got all this crossover movement, right? This Kratos is amazing because it allows us to spin, twist, do that. I think you're going to see more of these flywheel attachments. I think Garage Gym Reviews has a machine that's bolts to roll.
Like go into this stuff, yeah.
And then you can just rotate a little bit, right? Yeah. So some of this is figuring out how much exposure do I need and how much training do I need? Because I would get everyone into a lunge and start throwing medicine balls as part of our warm-ups. But also, you know, are we talking about keeping people fit and healthy versus preparing people for sport? How much, you know, it's easy to do a Cossack squat. Is that enough? So I think the programming is there. I think this old, like we go up and straight up and down all the time, I think it's kind of a specious argument.
What do you think what Marcus has done a great thing, in my opinion, in bringing back, there is value to some isolation movement. There's a ton of value. It was
I live on bicep curls.
It was, but you remember the day. I remember blatantly telling my buddies who were bicep curls, you fucking pussy, power clean. Do a pull-up, you fucking pussy. When I was the guy doing bicep curls not even a year ago, but I'm woke now, right? I'm a CrossFit woke.
That's right, CrossFit woke.
I'm CrossFit woke.
You know, here's what was, you know, what his programming was great was that, you know, like Marcus, whom I've known, I coached his first CrossFit workout. I've known him forever. He is a monster, just so you know. He's not just a pretty man. But, you know, it's okay to train for aesthetics. Or how about this? It's not even aesthetics. He has, if you do his program, you're going to have rock solid tendons and ligaments, because that's what a lot of that accessory work does. It makes you bulletproof, and you still can squat. And I'm pretty sure that on Instagram today or yesterday, I saw him power cleaning. So I'm sure it's in there still, but it turns out maybe we don't have to become Olympic lifters to have the stimulus. And by kind of focusing a little bit on one thing, you know, you realize that after 10 years of doing something, it's okay to specialize or have a certain style of training or things that feel good for you. I will never do kipping handstand push-ups ever again. I'm just out. I'm out. I'm good.
I always joke that it looks like if you were like, well, how could I suck my own dick? Like, how could I get it that close? I could be upside down and pull my nuts down, my hips down to my face and kick it up, and it just.
You know who hated kipping handstand push-ups? Greg Glassman.
Yeah.
Hated it.
Good.
When they first started, I was teaching in Arizona, and someone had just done it for the first time. There was a climber named Rob. Do you remember Rob? And he was blonde. He was a big wall climber, and he was doing.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I do.
He was doing Mary, and which was the alternative to Cindy, which people don't do very much, pistols and handstand push-ups, right? And I think pull-ups too. And he maybe his dips, but he was doing kipping, and it was just like people were like, "Oh, he's kipping. No one likes kipping. It shouldn't be kipping." And now I'm like, "Look at your neck. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And you know, I watched the grid, and I'm like, "Okay, well, as soon as it's a sport, and I don't think fitness always makes a great sport. It's not. Some movements, like you'll see that there are less and less ring dips in fitness competitions this year, because it turns out ring dips made a really stupid sport, and they had to come up with all these fake ways that you like. They're banned at the top. This will be difficult to prove in science, but their band at the top altered people's patterns so they could touch it, and that put them in a position as they lowered that they tore their pecs. But we needed some way to prove the lockout, right? Versus now, it's a handstand push-up on the rings. You got to do a muscle-up. I'm like, that's safe. Versus, right? So not all movements make good training exercises.
I remember watching Dutch Lowry doing butterfly pull-ups in that documentary that Savant did. I remember the first time seeing a butterfly pull-up, and my instinct initially was, oh fuck, like I don't like that. I didn't like even the way it looked. I didn't like whatever, but I'm like, but that is how I'm gonna do more pull-ups.
There was OPT and AFT, right?
Yeah.
And the first butterfly pull-up was done in a commercial gym on one of the machines, one of the pull-up rigs that had a gap in between.
Oh yeah, there's only 2 handles.
So
yeah,
you could that was how it was invented, right? Isn't that amazing?
That is incredible. And I remember Greg saying in some interview, he said, "Yeah, listen, I could have de-emphasized a couple things that kind of got away from us. The kipping pull-up and the kipping gymnastics, 100%. I wish I would have put more emphasis on the strict portion to a degree. And it's not that he's wrong. Just again, there was this element of CrossFit that just got, look at me, look what I can do, and
that's
human look like
nature.
how I can do it.
Look at how many miles I ran this week. That's no different.
It's in
look
all
how
sports.
Many cycles.
It's in all sports.
Right. And Greg never said. This is not defend Greg. Greg never said it's okay to round your back and pull the heaviest weight you can. He said you can handle post-maximal loads in an isometric position safely. That's what he said. And we would actually do that. I did that demo with him. He'd call me up, and I'd lift a 1 million-pound thing up off the ground, and my back wouldn't change. And he'd be like, see? And what you didn't see was, fundamental comping. And I think, early on we got into this notion that, men will die for points, and that was good and bad. Competing next to someone who's really good, if that's all you value is going as fast as you can, that's what you get.
Yeah. And one thing I want to make sure that hit on here as we kind of go through this, Juliet, is I got to meet her at the 2015 or maybe 16 Box Pro Summit, right? Box Pro magazine, whatever.
Oh yeah.
She came out and she was pretty much the maitre d'.
Box Pro magazine.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. And she came, and I actually lied. I actually invited myself. They said they were inviting the top 50 gym owners in the country. John Swanson was invited. Craig from Diablo was invited. Just all these OG names that I had grown up. I was not invited. I was, though, trying to get my name out, so I was writing for Box Pro for free. Every month I wrote an article, a business article, and then I just invited myself. I said, hey, I saw this thing,
glam.
and I said, can I come? I got something to say. I would think it'd be great. She's like, no, we're sold. No, we have 50 spots. No, but we really like your blogs every month. That's great. I'm like, fair enough. Her name is Heather Hartman, amazing woman. And then, I don't know, a couple weeks later, she's like, someone backed out. You want to go? I was like, fuck yes. And they paid for everything. We got to go there. And it was this, Guido Trinidad was there, and Chris Cooper was there. I was blown away. I was so happy to be there. But Juliet was there. And I would say 92% of the population of gym owners were males, which is the thing.
It was 95.
And she fucking alphaed the shit out of that entire thing, because you can tell they didn't really give her nobody really knew it. It was their first time doing it. They're just trying to see if this will work. We'll invite all these guys for free. We'll pay for all the food and booze, and then we're going to try to sell them on coming next year. We'll actually make money on it. And you could tell they didn't really have a playbook, but when she got up there, she absolutely killed it. Now, what I'm leaning into here is, as the CEO and the attorney element, right? There's very alpha positions. Those are like, don't fuck with me kind of roles and titles. At home, as parents, is that the same thing? Does she have a very alpha role at home? And you mentioned you're the warrior, and she's the warrior. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So my wife is the most extraordinary woman in my life and I've ever met. Like, she is the greatest partner I've ever had. She's the shit. I hope everyone feels that way about their partners, girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, whatever. A couple things about Juliet. She's a 2-time cancer survivor. She had thyroid cancer when she was 19. In 2019, she had breast cancer. And that's why we were like, fuck, 2019, 2020 is going to be awesome. And she's a 3-time world champion paddler. She's a state champion rower. She can suffer and outwork everyone. She went to law school. She decided she would never be in a position where she had to worry about money. That's why she became a lawyer by herself. She could always feed herself. So you have Lance-Armstrong syndrome on top of talent, on top of hustle and drive. And what I'll say is we have very different roles in the business, which is nice. I can't imagine. This doesn't work without both of us working together. 1 + 1 = 7, right? And I'm the 1 and Juliet's 6, right? That's really what it feels like sometimes. She's like, I talk to a lot of people about their businesses. I'm like, the problem is you're not married to Juliet. That's your fucking problem. And you find your step 1.
And I can't fix that problem.
Step 1, go to Chile for Camel cigarettes. Step 3, the ready state, right? No, what I'll say is that we are very good partners in how we address things. We don't, and we like the same things. Like Juliet's my best friend, and like I actually like to bro out with her. I don't get sick of Juliet and be like, I need a break. I gotta hang out with the bros. Like Juliet is the person I want to spend time with, and so her executive function is through the roof. I mean, she was the best brief at her law school. Her, like I said, her organizational skills and management skills. She can do 500 things to my one thing. And then also the things that I look at and see the world, Juliet can't do. So I wouldn't say we're the alpha thing. I will say that if I was married to a person who wasn't as strong-willed and independent and powerful, I would walk all over that person. There are so many extraordinary women that I get to work with and be around, and I'd be like, man, we would be a terrible match because I would just bully you into what I wanted to do. And Juliet is just like, nope, right? That's not what we're doing. And because of that, because I have a partner who will pull me back from the brink, that role is, I think you would be surprised how stoked we are. I think the number one thing about our household and our friends say is that we're stoked people. We are just generally very positive and very stoked. There's a lot of stoke going on. And there's not enough stoke in people's lives. I think, we're not just blatantly cheerful, but we wake up and we're kind of like, fuck, we're alive again today. And, Julia, I point out,
would be grateful. Would that be maybe the?
I don't even know if that's it. Juliet was attacked by a hippo when she was in Africa, almost died. Hippo attack after winning a world championship. Hippo attacked her canoe. She went in the water.
Something that sounds extremely comical if you're saying it like that. But if you've actually, like, I'm assuming they're probably the most aggressive animals.
It's the number one killer. So she takes a stroke. Hippo hits the boat. She goes in the water. There's gigantic crocs in the water. There's Cape Buffalo it's a bad scene. And then she has 3 more days of paddling after that, right? Attacked by hippo, cut on. So there's one death. Thyroid cancer is the second death. Breast cancer is another death. Both of our children could have killed Juliet, right, if it had been 50 years earlier. So I like to say Juliet's on her 6th life, right? And that is a woman who does not suffer fools, who doesn't have time for silly bullshit, and is all in to go hard in the paint and play hard and work hard. And, that's the partner I hope you have. That's the business partner I hope you have. And, I'm very, very, very lucky. So like I said, I can spot talent and patterns. And I met Juliet in Chile, and I remember thinking, wow, she's super cute. And we started chatting her up, and I was like, well, what do you do? And she's like, I'm an internet professional in San Francisco. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, you work what? Like, you're an internet professional in San Francisco? I'm a kayak rep and I live in a truck. And then, I was like, well, what's your life plan? She's like, oh, I just applied to law school. And I was like, what? Like, how do you even do that? Like, you want to see my kayak? And so early on, I was pretty sure. And I moved from Durango to San Francisco to follow this girl because I thought she was so exceptional. Never met a person like her before.
And you're a girl dad. This is something I selfishly tried to extract. I did it with Sean Pastuch. I had another interview. I'm 4 years into being a girl dad, and I always say it's my worst job. Like, the thing I do the worst day to day, I assume it's that because I've done it the least. I've only done it for 4 years. It can't be something I do great. So whenever I can, I try to steal and extract advice out of other girl dads who have a longer tenure than I.
I think I was terrified of having a son. I only wanted to have girls. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think...
Why?
Because I had 5 generations of bad father-son interactions. Like 5 poisoned generations. My great-great-grandfather was an Irish cop in Seattle. Alcoholic, my just trashed and tormented Jack Starrett, who trashed an alcoholic, trashed and tormented Rob Starrett, who trashed, just like at some point I was like, okay, that's good.
Stopping now, looking at it, do you still feel that way?
No, I could definitely have a son. I would name him Octavian. I would just fuck with everyone. Have you met my son, Octavian? You have to stand there like, hey, Octavian, come for dinner. I would love to see what our son, Juliet and I have son, but I only wanted daughters, and I got daughters, and I told Juliet when we were making kids, I was like, we're only having daughters, and that's a daughter, and that's a daughter. And she's like, you're so arrogant. And I was like, nope, it's daughters. So I only wanted girls. It's so awesome to launch this secret attack on the rest of the world through daughters. They're so subtle. They don't understand what's, I can't imagine the other world. And I think it would, Georgia has, was my oldest, and first date. that we named after, is she has this great 17-year-old boyfriend who is so rad. We call him son number one. It's like the first kind of true son I've had in the house, you know. And I still prefer my daughters. They're great.
I love that. Do you think about that life cycle of boyfriends they're going to have that you're going to love and then lose?
100%. You know, the problem with Georgia and this current boyfriend is I'm actually rooting for him because the Starretts are kind of big, powerful people, and there's a lot here, you know. I want that kid to be successful, but what I'll tell you is that he's such a good person, a good kid, that all of her relationships are doomed. The bar is set so high. You know, you come in, you do 2-minute Fran. You know, anything else than that is kind of shitty. So she's kind of stuck now with a model. But also, you know, we practice and we model what we see. And, you know, how Juliet and I hold hands or hug or how we cook dinner together or how we solve problems, that's what your kids pick up. So, you know, who you are is everything. And if you want to have a rad daughter, be a rad dad. Just be a rad dad to your partner.
My man, I know you got to go, and I cannot tell you enough. Thank you so much
Dude,
for the time.
We can do this for another 7 hours.
I know.
I'm not bored.
I know this. No, I'm gonna let you go. I know you're getting your wrap up line over here, brother. I thank you absolutely so much. One thing I'll ask though. One thing I use you, and I've been using you on this when people want to create anything. I just say, like, listen, you said it earlier today. You got to be awesome at something. You got to have something educational or entertaining and a unique way of saying it, right? So everyone out there whether they're trying to get people into their gym or they're trying to become an internet person or whatever it may be, from someone who committed to 365 days of making content or 365 days of just making his wife coffee to show that he cares, could you just give one little piece of advice for someone who wants to create and one day wants to have a ripple effect that they can't even fathom it right now, but they want to create that thing?
Look, I don't even think you have to be that talented. I think you just have to be really consistent. Like, I don't think people realize that the slow application, you know, I think I told you this, my friend Matt Vincent says, you'll get strong, just lift heavy once a week for 10 years and let me know what happens. I think the internet and the success around us and people who are really successful right now, it's hard to appreciate how long they've been doing it. It looks like it's overnight success. Our big joke is like, oh, best breakout artist, best new artist. Oh, congratulations, just 10 years of fucking grinding and eating ramen, and now look at you. You just made it. It's all easy. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing. And you're going to do it because it's the right thing to do, and it shouldn't be the only thing. The reason you're doing it is because you're going to get rich or, you know, all the kids, when Instagram goes away or people get bored, what are those kids going to do? It's you know, it's tough. I think if you're an influencer, I think that's a tough position to be in. You know, I think if you're serving people and doing the right thing for the right reason for a long time, that's enough. It really is. And because everyone else is going to get tired and die off. I see a ton of people try to be our competitors, and I'm like, oh, look at their great content. And then like 3 weeks later, it's drip, and then it's less. And I'm like, oh, you couldn't keep up. You know, you didn't have it to be consistent. You know, you don't have to kill yourself in the gym every day. You just have to be consistent. And you will make massive progress if you're just consistent. And so, you know, I don't even think, like, it helps to be charismatic and have it. And I don't think everyone can be, you know, a superstar. You know, not everyone is a lead singer. That's okay. You can be a fucking bass player, best bass player in the world, but just do it for a long time. But people are just skidding around, and that didn't work, and I didn't make my thing. And dude, I'm like, just sit here and do your thing for a long time. It really, like, that's the magic, persistence.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Starrett.
Oh, man.
Thank you, sir.
Such a pleasure. I will see you again, my friend.
Absolutely.